Chapter 419 Refining the Heavenly Luckstone. Chapter 419 Refining the Heavenly Luckstone. Indeed, with the power upgrade from the Barbarian Bull's spiritual talisman, though there was no surge to Ding Yuan Xian's speed, there was still a little increase. After a few steps, he soon caught up with Ling Han. "Do you think you're the only one with a spiritual talisman?" Ling Han laughed. He drew out the final Swift Cloud talisman and smacked it onto his body. Instantly, his speed shot up. There was a maximum limit to the effectiveness of the Swift Cloud talisman. For a user in the spiritual pedestal tier, the speed upgrade it offered was only about 20%. However, Ling Han was still in the 8th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and thus the upgrade he got still doubled his original speed. Instantly, he once again distanced himself from Ding Yuan Xian. Ding Yuan Xian could not help but grit his teeth. He drew out a trump card, and Ling Han would draw a trump card of his own to deal with it. Could he really kill this unbelievably young elite? He ceased his advance and gave the matter some consideration, then decided to give up hunting down Ling Han. Not only that, he also decided that he would leave the North region and venture into the Middle State. Otherwise, if he continued to stay in the North region, perhaps he would need another 10+ years before he could manage to break through to the Flower Blossom tier. Leave. Anyone who could manage to make it to the prodigy role naturally had no lack of a decisive will. He immediately exited the Dark Devil Forest and headed directly to the Middle State without even returning to his own clan. Ling Han naturally did not know of Ding Yuan Xian's decision. After he recovered from his injuries, he began to leave behind carved messages to provoke Ding Yuan Xian again. But even after 5 days had passed, he still did not see Ding Yuan Xian appear. Guessed that the latter might have given up his plans on hunting him down. Surprisingly decisive of him. Ling Han nodded. Ding Yuan Xian had seen the treasure that he had and could still leave so decisively. He was indeed a character. Still, without a sparring partner, he could only work hard and train on his own. Thankfully, he was already in the middle period of the 8th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, which was already quite fast. Ling Han still continued to search for various spiritual herbs on one end, as well as cultivating on the other. A month had passed and he successfully gained 2 types of spiritual herbs that the Black Tower did not have yet. Furthermore, his cultivation level finally reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. If you refine the Heavenly Luckstone at this moment, and use the installation of power from the Black Tower, you will be able to maximize the effects. Small Tower hinted. Ling Han nodded agreeably and drew out a piece of the Heavenly Luckstone. This was actually a stone bead, and when he crushed it, the inside turned out to be hollow. There was a kind of liquid inside there. The refreshing fragrance of this liquid wafted into his nose. Meanwhile, Hunyao also took out a piece and similarly sat in a cross-legged position. She was even more direct. She simply threw the piece of Heavenly Luckstone into her mouth and chewed on it for a bit. Ka ka ka, and the rock was crushed. However, there was no odd signs at all. What? Feeling as if your insides were boiling, and waves in your sea of consciousness. It was as if nothing happened at all. Ling Han knew that the Heavenly Luckstone's effects would only be seen when he broke through to the next tier. It would allow the cultivator's battle prowess to instantly soar up another 4 or 5 battle stars. Exactly how much the increase would be would depend on how sturdy the foundations for the cultivation level was. Ling Han had not eaten this thing in his last life, but he had obtained one for the sake of his smallest disciple, Jiang Yufeng. That brat only had 7 battle stars of battle prowess in the 1st layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, but when he broke through to the Flower Blossom tier, he actually still had 6 battle stars of battle prowess. The higher one's cultivation level, the more difficult it would be to challenge a stronger opponent. If it was not for the Heavenly Luckstone, Jiang Yufeng would only have a maximum of 3 battle stars when he broke through to the Flower Blossom tier. So that was proof of how awesome the Heavenly Luckstone was. Ling Han mused ruefully for a moment, then exited the Black Tower together with Hunyao. They began to head towards where the crimson-red chilling ice grass was growing. They hadn't walked for very long, when Ling Han felt a shiver creep up his back. He immediately stopped walking and said, "Old wretch from the Thousand Corpse sect, how long do you intend to keep following me?" Elder Nine Clouds walked out of the dense forest, a hint of confusion in his eyes. He had witnessed Ling Han enter the midst of the demonic Qi with his very eyes. That was something that even he was wary of and dared not come into contact with. Yet Ling Han not only walked out of it alive, he looked extremely lively and conscious. There was absolutely no sign that he had been turned insane by the demonic Qi. Exactly how many treasures did this brat possess? Elder Nine Clouds' greed blazed. He knew that Ling Han could enter the Black Tower, and so had been trying to find a chance to attack at a time when Ling Han was unguarded the most to kill him instantly. Otherwise, if he once again allowed Ling Han to duck into the Black Tower, then he could only return without achieving anything. "Young man, you have already drawn the attention of our sect. Even if I cannot do anything to you, there will be even stronger people appearing next time to take your life and snatch away your good fortune. They are also going to refine you into a corpse soldier," he forced out through clenched teeth. He had never imagined that a junior in the spiritual ocean tier would be so hard to deal with. Ling Han gave an "oh" and asked curiously, "How strong are they?" "Hee, do you want to probe me? You are really too naive. Do you think that I'm a 3-year-old kid?" Elder Nine Clouds sneered. Ling Han drew out a stalk of ginseng and said, "Be good. Tell me, and I'll give you a stalk of ginseng." "Fuck." Elder Nine Clouds was driven to fuming rage. Did this brat really think of him as a dog that he would tempt him in this way? His eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. He declared, "Junior, if I do not refine you into a skinned corpse soldier, I swear that I will no longer be human." "You speak as if you are still human," Ling Han mocked. "Die!" Elder Nine Clouds shouted harshly. "The only one who will die is you!" A booming voice resounded and a sturdy figure emanating an oppressive aura shot out. "Fist Emperor!" Elder Nine Clouds' aged eyes tensed, and he showed signs of wariness. Though the other had not broken through to the flower blossom tier for very long, he had managed to form Fist Ray already, and had even managed to battle the golden blood demonic ape to a standstill. One could not help but tremble in the face of such battle prowess. Moreover, the Thousand Corpse sect depended on the corpse soldiers they controlled. Their personal battle prowess was not too impressive. Furthermore, though the other had suffered injuries after battling the golden blood demonic ape, not only had he recovered from his injuries after so many days, his ability had also advanced further, as he had broken through to the second layer of the flower blossom tier. One could not help but gasp at the fact that he could still advance so fast even after he had broken through to the flower blossom tier. The Rain Emperor was a dominating figure. When his eyes turned upon Elder Nine Clouds, an endless killing intent appeared in them. "Monster from the Thousand Corpse sect, kill!" He curled his hand into a fist and delivered a punch. The fist ray appeared in bright brilliance. This was a deadly weapon that had exceeded Qi. One could say that even if Ling Han managed to form 30 flashes of sword Qi, they would still be unable to stand against the weakest fist ray. This was a one-sided domination due to the difference in quality. Of course, if Ling Han managed to condense the 30 flashes of sword Qi into sword ray, then that naturally would give him a dominating advantage against the fist ray that had been condensed from 10 flashes of Qi. Although Elder Nine Clouds was in the 5th layer of the flower blossom tier, he was completely incapable of standing against the Rain Emperor, who had already formed Fist Ray. Within a few moves, he was already wailing. He exclaimed harshly, "Fist Emperor, I do not want to become your enemy, but if you continue to be overbearing, don't blame me for being merciless. So what if I am? Any person that I want to kill has never managed to survive." The Rain Emperor used the Son of Heaven fist technique. The fist ray moved with a brilliance, possessing terrifying might behind it. Elder Nine Clouds gave a sharp whistle, and a strange noise was immediately heard from some distance away. Very soon, an iron coffin slid over. Pun! The coffin lid shot open and a corpse soldier jumped out. It was completely silver in color, as if it was forged from silver. "Level 3 silver armored corpse," Ling Han said. This corpse soldier had reached the limit for a silver armored corpse. Kaka, that's right. This is a level 3 silver-armored corpse. After my various methods of tempering and refining, its ability is now close to the 9th layer of the flower blossom tier. Elder Nine Clouds haughtily declared. Fist Emperor, it's still possible for you to leave now *****. He didn't finish and cursed. That was because one of the fists of the Rain Emperor had already shot forward grandly. Chapter 420 Battering Away. Chapter 420 Battering Away. The Rain Emperor was still the Rain Emperor, dominating, unwavering like an emperor, and with a firm resolve. Elder Nine Clouds quickly manipulated the corpse soldier to receive the oncoming barrage of attacks. Pu. Endless muffled noises were heard. The Rain Emperor's punches battered the corpse soldier, but only left behind multiple very light wounds. It was indeed a level 3 silver-armored corpse. This defense was comparable to the best kind of level 6 forging materials. Even Fist Ray practically left no damage. However, the Rain Emperor paid it no mind. He had the dominating character of an emperor. His punches continued to rain down, determined to batter the corpse soldier into dust. Elder Nine Clouds smirked. If they were only talking about defense, this corpse soldier was even stronger than the demonic ape, and only lacked power and destructive ability. But there was no need for him to kill the Rain Emperor. It was enough to contain him. Young man, are you still going to flee now? He smirked. The fact that he possessed a spirit tool that could contain living creatures was an unbelievably shocking secret. He did not believe that Ling Han would dare to use it in front of the Fist Emperor. In this manner, he had gained a chance. Ling Han smiled and said, No! Haha, so you are prepared to die? Elder Nine Clouds' killing intent intensified. No, I still have a helper. Ling Han looked towards the northwest and called out, Brother Ao, please lend me a hand. What? Elder Nine Clouds followed Ling Han's lead and looked towards the direction he was looking at, but did not detect any movement. He scoffed. Brat, don't make this unnecessarily complicated. Ho-ho, a grand cultivator of the flower blossom tier, and yet the sensory abilities are beneath spiritual ocean tier 1s? Does the Thousand Corpse sect all consist of such trash? Laughter resounded, and a person walked forth in midair. It was Ao Feng. Elder Nine Clouds instantly frowned. Why was there another cultivator of the flower blossom tier? Though this man, too, had just broken through to the flower blossom tier recently, who knew how many battle stars he possessed? Most importantly, for members of the Thousand Corpse sect, their personal battle prowess was really not that remarkable. Otherwise, one who was in the 5th layer should have absolute confidence in his victory against an opponent in the 1st layer. Grandmaster Ling is indeed an extraordinary genius, Ao Feng complimented. He, too, had witnessed Ling Han run into the midst of the demonic chi but did not suffer the slightest bit from its effects, which was something that left him shocked. Furthermore, he had been standing so far away to observe the battle just now, but Ling Han had still discovered his presence. This kind of divine sense was really terrifying. One had to understand that Ling Han had been in the heaven tier in his last life, and even if only a sliver of the divine sense of the heaven tier was left behind, if one were talking about sensory abilities, not even someone in the spiritual infant tier could catch up to him. Thank you for your praise, Brother Ao. Ling Han smiled, then began to fervently egg him on. Brother Ao, this is one of the dregs of the Thousand Corpse sect. Please help to eliminate him and remove this poisonous tumor for the world's peace. Of course. Ao Feng nodded, seeming to be very righteous. However, internally, he was extremely displeased. His original intention was to allow the Rain Emperor and Elder Nine Clouds to battle to the point that they were both severely wounded, would then step out to calmly deal with the situation. He had never thought that Ling Han would call him out ahead of time. After all, he had only just broken through to the flower blossom tier, and unlike the Rain Emperor who had formed Fist Ray and was a real ruler, his battle prowess was only slightly above 2 or 3 battle stars. Against Elder Nine Clouds, it would really be difficult to decide the victor. However, the Thousand Corpse sect actually dared to set up a branch right beneath the nose of the Winter Moon sect, obviously with devious plans in mind, As an elder of the Winter Moon sect, since he had broken through to the Flower Blossom tier, he was naturally promoted from attendant to elder. Now that Ao Feng had seen a member of the Thousand Corpse sect, what logic was there in simply standing by and watching? His right hand shook and a plain-looking sword appeared, covered with an obscure pattern. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This was a level 6 spirit tool. He surmised that it had to be a family heirloom of the Ao clan. Most importantly, the forging materials to create a level 6 spirit tool were really too rare, so such a spirit tool could only be passed down the generations. One could not simply forge a new one as one liked. Elder Nine Cloud's expression became serious. His arms spread out and moved. A grayish corpse chi came to being, which slowly twined around his figure. Corpse chi and demonic chi were different methods that could achieve the same result. Demonic chi could cause one to go mad, whereas corpse chi was poisonous. Even if one in the Flower Blossom tier inhaled it for too long or was exposed to it for too long, his whole body would similarly rot, or even transform into a corpse soldier. Ao Feng waved his sword and advanced, not daring to keep any of his power in reserve. 8 flashes of sword chi danced, fully displaying the might of a ruler. Ling Han nodded. If he were being honest, Ao Feng was indeed a genius, and though Ling Dongxing was not an idiot, either, the latter did not have as much talent as the former. If the two of them battled on the same cultivation level, Ling Dongxing would definitely lose. Therefore, it was necessary to have a dominating advantage in terms of cultivation level in order to allow Ling Dongxing to emerge victorious against Ao Feng. For anyone else, this might be a very difficult thing to do, but for Ling Han, it was practically a piece of cake. The spirit herbs in the Black Tower were becoming more abundant, and he had absolute confidence that he could help Ling Dongxing soar to the peak period of the spiritual pedestal tier in 3 years' time, and break through to the spiritual infant tier in 20 years' time. However, above that, his advance would slow down to the speed of a tortoise's crawl. After all, after the breakthrough of one's cultivation to the spiritual infant and the deity transformation tier, alchemical pills would only be effective in helping to accumulate origin power. Without enough comprehension of the cultivation level, no matter how many alchemical pills you were given, it would be a waste. Only genuine natural treasures had the amazing effect of assisting one in comprehending the great Tao. This was a blessing from nature. The matter of vengeance could be advanced slowly. Rescuing his mother from prison had to be the priority now. If he had to wait until Ling Dongxing possessed enough power, then his mother would have experienced too much suffering. Ling Han thought. The battle happening in front of him now was very exciting, but as someone who had once been in the heaven tier in his last life, it was not to the level that would interest him. He would not be inspired or draw inspiration from watching. Ao Feng had the help of a spirit tool and obviously had the upper hand. But the Rain Emperor was gradually falling into a disadvantage. The defense of a level 3 silver-armored corpse were practically invincible, so how was he to continue playing this game? If the Rain Emperor was in the late period of the Flower Blossom tier, then he would still have a chance to win, but currently he was too far from that. The situation was very delicate. If the corpse soldier could kill or force the Rain Emperor to retreat, and then join forces with Elder Nine Clouds, then they would definitely be able to subdue Ao Feng easily. However, on the other hand, if Ao Feng managed to kill Elder Nine Clouds first, then the result would similarly be decided. So would it be the Rain Emperor who would first fail to hold on, or Elder Nine Clouds? Without a doubt, it was Elder Nine Clouds who would first beat the drums of retreat. What a joke, for someone as dominating and forceful as the Rain Emperor, the stronger the opponent, the more his battle spirit would blaze. He was the standard type that would use battle to cultivate his own battle spirit, and make use of a bloody battle to break through his own limits. How could he possibly give up on such a good opponent like a level 3 silver-armored corpse? Elder Nine Clouds fled, and the Rain Emperor and Ao Feng were hot on his heels. However, after a while, the two of them returned. Naturally, they had lost track of him. After all, Elder Nine Clouds had too much of an advantage in terms of cultivation level. Running away only depended on one's speed, and the ability to battle an opponent stronger than oneself was not of much use here. Ao Feng exchanged some pleasantries with Ling Han, and also invited him to visit the Winter Moon sect as a guest. Then, he conversed with the Rain Emperor too before begging his leave and departing. It was unknown whether he was heading back to the Winter Moon sect, or continuing on his quest to find Han Lin. Grandmaster Ling, we have not seen each other for several months, and you have indeed once again made me see you in a new light. The Rain Emperor smiled. His voice was filled with ruefulness. He was certain that Ling Han would definitely become an Earth-grade alchemist, but he had not foreseen that it would happen so quickly. A young man that was still over a month away from reaching 18 years old was shockingly already an Earth-grade alchemist. Who would dare to believe such a thing? Congratulations to you for breaking through to the Flower Blossom tier and casting off your mortal shell, Rain Emperor. Ling Han smiled in return. Chapter 421 Thrashing a Dog. Chapter 421 Thrashing a Dog. Though there was quite a gap between Ling Han and the Rain Emperor in terms of cultivation, Ling Han's status as an Earth-grade alchemist was enough to let the two of them stand on equal footing. Strictly speaking, an Earth-grade low-level alchemist even had slightly higher status than a Flower Blossom tier cultivator. The two of them conversed for a while. When he found out that Ling Han was going to collect the crimson-red chilling ice grass, the Rain Emperor indicated that he would like to go with Ling Han and give him a helping hand. Ling Han gladly accepted. After so many days, who knows how many people were already aiming for that spiritual herb. Though he believed that no one below spiritual infant tier could obtain it successfully, there might be cultivators in the Flower Blossom tier standing guard by the side. Who would seize it from him when they saw that he had succeeded? What was he going to do then? The secret of the Black Tower was already known to some people, and Ling Han did not want to allow it to spread even wider. Thankfully, whether it was Rong Huanxian, Azura Demon Emperor, or Elder Nine Clouds, they all only thought that he had a spirit tool that could contain living things and did not know that it was the Black Tower, which was not as ordinary as merely being able to contain living creatures. It's now even more difficult to see through this little girl. The Rain Emperor turned to look at Hun Yo. In the past, he could still somehow manage to sense that the little girl had the cultivation of the Gushing Spring tier, but now it was as if Hun Yo had turned into mist and looked very hazy to his eyes. Hun Yo giggled in response. Since Ling Han treated the Rain Emperor politely, she would give him face as well. Otherwise, who would bother? The three of them journeyed towards the location of the crimson-red chilling ice grass. It was located in the core area in the first place, so after only less than half a day, the three of them had arrived at their destination. However, they were not the only ones. 3 other people were already here. Yao Huiyu, Tong Jiming, as well as Zhu Xuan'er. These 3 obviously wanted to obtain the crimson-red chilling ice grass as well, yet were unable to do so. Though Zhu Xuan'er's face could not be seen, it had to be filled with anxiety. Sensing the approach of Ling Han and the others, Yao Huiyu's eyes swept over them and immediately lit up brilliantly, as if his gaze had transformed into uncountable sharp blades that shone with luster. An endless battle spirit gushed out from him. He stared fixatedly at the Rain Emperor. Wang wang wang. The long sword at his waist actually released humming sounds, as if it wanted to exit its sheath on its own. The Rain Emperor was the same. A mighty aura spread out from him with multiple flashes of divine light surging around him, which transformed into multiple solid fists. The 2 of them had already taken a fancy to each other in the great battle with the demonic ape, but afterwards, both had suffered heavy injuries and thus naturally went off to heal their wounds, as well as digest the battle comprehension they had obtained through this battle. This was the second time they had met, and both were at their best condition. As a result, battle spirit instantly soared in both of them. Young man, you still dare to appear. Have you forgotten what my lord has said? Tong Jiming smirked coldly at Ling Han. In the past, Yao Huiyu had declared that the next time he saw Ling Han, he was definitely going to take his life. Ling Han glanced at him, and said, Whose dog is this that only knows how to bark crazily all day and night? If the owner's not going to take care of properly, I'm going to kill it. Yao Huiyu withdrew his attention from the Rain Emperor and said calmly to Ling Han, If you have the ability, then you can kill if you like, Tong Jiming sneered. He was in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, and his battle prowess was at least 12 stars, so how could a young man in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean compare to that? Pooh! He was instantly astonished. The 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? Not even 3 months had passed, but how had this guy leaped from the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier all the way to the 9th? This. Previously, he had praised Yao Huiyu for being in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier at 17 years old, and this young man in front of him now was in no way inferior. Could it be that this would be the second coming of Yao Huiyu? However, so what if he was in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? There was still a gap of a complete tier between the both of them, and that was a gulf that no amount of talent would be able to compensate for. See how I shall suppress you! He shouted loudly. Since Yao Huiyu had allowed him to act, he would naturally not have any more reservations. Ling Han smiled calmly. He was able to deal even with Ding Yuan Xin, who had 15 battle stars, so what more Tong Jiming, who only had 12. Furthermore, he had already broken through to the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier now, so his battle prowess had naturally increased by another 1 or 2 battle stars. However, he did not have the time to tangle with him. Anyways, he wanted to collect the crimson red chilling ice grass, so he might as well just play his trump card directly. Small tower! He called out internally. Hong's small tower instantly moved the black tower to begin the installation of power. His aura began to spike madly. The middle period, the late period, the peak period of the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. He only paused momentarily before passing over the threshold smoothly and into the spiritual pedestal tier. Then, it was the 1st layer, the 2nd, the 3rd, and soared crazily like this all the way, until his cultivation finally stalled at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Pooh! 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 The Rain Emperor, Yao Huiyu, Xuan'er, and Tong Jiming all widened their eyes at the same time, completely incapable of believing what they saw happen with their very eyes. What kind of alchemical pill is this that would allow one's cultivation to increase by a whole major tier? The Rain Emperor and Xuan'er knew that Ling Han was an earth-grade alchemist, so it was not too strange for him to be capable of concocting an alchemical pill that could raise his cultivation level temporarily, but they had never heard of there being one that could grant one such a great increase. Meanwhile, Tong Jiming's mouth twitched. Though he had not battled with Ling Han before, merely based on Yao Huiyu's judgment about Ling Han, he knew that the latter definitely had terrifying battle prowess. And now that the both of them had equal cultivation levels, how was he supposed to continue? For the sake of your master, I shall spare your life. Ling Han waved his hand. A flash of sword chi appeared and shot forwards. Tong Jiming hurried to parry, but this flash of sword chi directly flung open his guarding arms. With a pu, it streamed past his neck, leaving behind a wound that instantly gushed out blood. His expression changed due to shock. This was obviously Ling Han being merciful. Otherwise, he was definitely capable of killing him in an instant. Of course, if Ling Han really made the move to kill him, Yao Huiyu would definitely not sit by and watch quietly, and act to save him. Yao Huiyu looked contemplative. The current Ling Han was still much weaker than him, yet he still made his hands itch incomparably, wanting to challenge the former to a battle. However, whining against such a weakling was absolutely of no help to his formation of sword heart. Thus, he forcefully suppressed the urge. Ling Han did not give him a second glance, and directly walked towards the crimson-red chilling ice grass from the fiery area. He had taken a petal of the golden flower of the stone, so need not fear the flames. Xuan'er's eyes lit up. Could it be that Ling Han was capable of collecting the crimson-red chilling ice grass? She instantly cast off her thoughts of stopping him. She was completely incapable of plucking this spiritual herb, but if it fell into Ling Han's possession, then there was at least some hope. Ling Han strode forwards. Wang, the thunder battle armor activated and multiple flashes of lightning appeared and repelled all the flames. He now had the ability of the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, which was enough to activate the defense ability of the Thunder Battle Armor until the extent of the late period of the Flower Blossom tier. Yao Huiyu, that kind of monster, obviously was only in the second layer of the Flower Blossom tier, but had at least 10 battle stars. However, battle prowess being 10 stars did not mean that defense was also 10 stars. The might of the flames would attack from all directions, so it was useless no matter how monstrous your battle prowess was unless he could destroy this whole place with a wave of his sword. Therefore, in this place, Yao Huiyu's resistance was at most comparable to a normal cultivator's in the 3rd or 4th layer of the Flower Blossom tier. The maximum was the 5th layer. It was definitely no higher than that. Ling Han quickly traveled half the distance, but as he continued to advance, his speed slowed down. Numerous holes appeared on the Thunder Battle Armor. The flames entered through these holes and battered Ling Han's body. Instantly, a charred hole would appear. However, Ling Han did not even wrinkle his brow, and merely continued to walk forwards. Chapter 422 Obtaining the Spiritual Herb. Chapter 422 Obtaining the Spiritual Herb. In Ling Han's eyes, there was nothing more important than obtaining the crimson red chilling ice grass on this trip. In exchange for this spiritual herb, he could even sacrifice the heavenly luck stone and the primal chaos source rock. He was suffering under enormous agony, but looked as if he felt nothing. The body of rock cliff could cut off his sense of pain, and the indestructible heaven scroll was fully protecting the source of his life, and added with the protection offered by the Thunder Battle Armor, this granted him the qualification to continue advancing. The Rain Emperor and Yao Huiyu both looked astonished. If they were merely talking in terms of defense, Ling Han was already superior to the both of them. However, in battle, defense was a passive ability because a powerful level of attack also belonged to defense, capable of forcing an opponent to the level that he could not fight back. So even if defense were slightly weaker, what could that impact? Their astonishment was due to that suit of battle armor that Ling Han was wearing. It was really too shocking. It was actually capable of raising the defense to the level of passive protection of a cultivator in the peak period of the Flower Blossom tier, and protect Ling Han from all angles. However, for some unknown reason, they kept feeling that there was some flaw in this battle armor. That was because a hole had been pierced through the Thunder Battle Armor, which was the reason for this faint feeling of strangeness. It was still fine for lower cultivation level, but the higher the cultivation level, the more magnified this flaw would be. After all, it was not a completely whole, flawless level 10 spirit tool. Zhu Xian'er's eyes lit up in the meantime. She hoped very much that Ling Han could successfully collect the spiritual herb. As long as he succeeded, there would still be room for discussion. Ling Han did not bother with what the others were thinking. He simply strode forwards, intending to take as much advantage of this chance to collect the crimson red chilling ice grass as possible. Otherwise, he could only wait until after he broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier to once again make use of the installation of power from the Black Tower. But he still wanted to suppress his own cultivation level and return to completely perfect this cultivation level, and did not intend to break through so quickly. Thus, if he could make use of this installation of power to obtain the crimson red chilling ice grass, that was naturally best. Moreover, this kind of trial was also a chance for him. 4 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters, 1 meter. The spiritual herb was within reach, but Ling Han looked to be in great pain. The might of these flames was really too terrifying. Even if he had cut off his sense of pain, he was still unable to escape it completely, because he felt as if his divine sense was also burning, making him feel extremely horrible. He definitely had to be as fast as possible. Ling Han took another step forward and finally arrived next to the spiritual herb. However, he did not pluck the spiritual herb, but rather drew the demon birth sword, intending to dig out the spiritual herb. As long as he could store it into the Black Tower alive, then who cared what kind of environmental conditions it needed? It would be able to continue growing in the Black Tower, and could grow even better, as one day inside would be equal to 3 years. This was a level 7 spiritual herb, so Ling Han naturally did not intend to use it only once. Jiang, the sword scraped against the white rock underneath, instantly creating innumerable sparks of fire, and left behind a light trace. However, the tip of the sword solidified into a flash of snow white. An icy cold feeling quickly spread out from the blade of the sword, which made Ling Han shiver and feel as if all the blood in his body was about to freeze. He planned to slice this piece of rock in the middle and store it into the Black Tower as well. The tip of the sword thus naturally stabbed into the icy ground, which caused the attack of an icy air. And what was even stranger was that though the other half of the sword's blade was in the fiery ground, it did not cancel out the cold air, but rather cooperated with it extremely well. After a surge of cold air, then came a surge of burning heat, making Ling Han's blood that had been frozen just moments ago boil again in an instant. It was such agony that he immediately spat out blood. Fuck, this was the genuine feeling of experiencing ice and fire at the same time. Ling Han gritted his teeth, but had no intention to stop at all. Ding, 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 he used the demon birth sword like it was a chopper and continuously sliced away at the rock. Thankfully, it was a level 10 spirit tool. If the grade was slightly lower and it was used to slice away at this kind of place where ice and fire wove together, the durability of the weapon would definitely be decreased. Within a few moments, it'd probably be shattered. However, even so, because Ling Han's ability was at solid disadvantage, he did not slice very quickly. Meanwhile, his left arm, left leg, and right leg were beginning to be charred, and the fragrance of barbecued meat gradually wafted out. His right arm was still fine because he focused the indestructible heaven scroll to heal it and gave up on the other, unimportant, parts. Hunyo was very anxious and jumped around in panic. However, she was still filled with wariness for this ice and fire area, and did not dare to rush in thoughtlessly. Moreover, Ling Han was still standing and waving his sword, so things had not advanced to the worst extent. If Ling Han fell down, she would definitely scramble over and try her best to drag Ling Han out. When his 2 legs were about to be burned off, Ling Han used the indestructible true fluid without hesitation. He had a total of 3 drops, which would allow him to recover completely for 3 times. Wang, a majestic essence of life flowed within his body. Instantly, all his injuries were healed. Ding, 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 Ling Han was chopping more energetically. But when the essence of the indestructible true fluid was completely expended, his arm and legs began to once again show signs of being charred. Meanwhile, Yao Huiyu and the others were watching dumbfounded. He was actually able to recover instantly from such serious injuries. How terrifying was that kind of divine pill that possessed such recovery abilities? If they managed to get one, then wouldn't that mean that they would be granted an extra life? Yao Hui was not yet aware of Ling Han's identity, but Zhu Xuan'er and the Rain Emperor both nodded internally. He was really worthy of being an Earth-grade alchemist. He was awesome. If this was known to Lu Jitong and the other Earth-grade alchemists, they would definitely break out into tears. How could there possibly be such an awesome Earth-grade alchemical pill in this world? Only the legendary sacred medicine, the 9 Immortals pill, possessed such effects, but that was a heaven-grade mid-level alchemical pill, and there was no longer anyone who could concoct it in this world. Ling Han sliced and sliced. Ding, 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 the sounds of impact did not stop, which made Yao Huiyu and the others all confused. Why did he not simply pull out the spiritual herb and leave, but chop the rock so determinedly instead? Could it be that he actually wanted to get a live one and take it back so that he could continue to grow it? Did he actually have a suitable environment for it? They had really guessed correctly. However, there was absolutely no way that they would actually guess that there existed a priceless treasure like the Black Tower. Ling Han quickly used the second drop of indestructible true fluid. However, this time, it was obvious that his recovery speed had slowed down, and the medicinal effects had also disappeared faster. Even such a godly item would make one slowly immune to it. True, a drop of indestructible true fluid was practically capable of reviving a dead person, and furthermore, healed his injuries completely. If there was not any kind of limits to it, then it would really be illogical. When the effects of the second drop of indestructible true fluid completely vanished, Ling Han had already chopped off 2/3 of the white rock. He could not help but sigh. If he could grasp Sword Ray at this time and use 10,000 techniques return to one at the same time, Perhaps one strike would be enough to completely chop this piece of rock in two. There was no other way at this point, so he could only keep circulating the Four Seasons sword technique. If he used the mysterious 3000, then Yao Huiyu would definitely be able to tell. At that time, then it was even possible that the old monsters of the Heaven Sword sect would move out and interrogate him forcefully to find out where he had learnt this sword technique from. By then, even if he could invent some kind of reason, how could the Heaven Sword sect spare an outsider that had learnt a sword technique of their sect? Thus, before he had adequate power, Ling Han did not want to let the Heaven Sword sect know that he had learnt the 3 styles of black origin. I chop. Chop, 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 chop. Only after a while was Ling Han forced to use the last drop of indestructible true fluid, and by this time, the white rock was close to being chopped off completely. Ling Han seemed to have gone mad. There was no longer any indestructible true fluid to extend his life for him, so he had to chop the white rock completely before he collapsed. Chapter 423. Chapter 423, Battling Yao Huiyu. Charred skin once again appeared on Ling Han's arms and legs, but there was only a tiny sliver of the white rock left. He gave a loud yell and made a vast slash with his sword. Pun, the rock finally broke. He stretched out a hand and pressed down on it, whilst communicating with the Black Tower. Shio, he had stored both the broken rock along with the scarlet rainbow frost ice grass inside the Black Tower. Retreat! He hurriedly retreated, and in a few steps, exited the zone of flames. He quickly drew out multiple alchemical pills which he swallowed down like crazy. In the meantime, he continuously circulated the indestructible heaven scroll to heal his injuries. You're already cooked, Bunyo said with a hint of heartache in her voice as she raced over, but when she gave a few sniffs with her little nose, her saliva dripped out of her mouth. Smells nice. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched. Was this little girl going to pounce on him and take a bite? Grandmaster Ling, please give the crimson red chilling ice grass to me. No matter how many origin crystals, I will pay you for it. Zhu Xuan'er immediately exclaimed. Grandmaster Ling? Yao Huiyu wore a thoughtful smile. He's an alchemist? Earth-grade low-level alchemist, the Rain Emperor answered. This time, Yao Huiyu finally looked surprised. He had estimated that Ling Han was at most a black-grade mid-level alchemist, or high-level at best, but he had never imagined that Ling Han was actually an Earth-grade alchemist. Don't think lesser of an Earth-grade low-level alchemist. Once one passed Earth grade, it was like a cultivator had passed into the flower blossom tier. It was a completely different plane. A young man who had yet to reach 18 years old was actually an Earth grade low-level alchemist. Yao Huiyu's talent in martial arts was indeed worthy of receiving a thumbs up from mostly everyone in this world, but if his talent was compared to Ling Han's accomplishments in alchemy, Ling Han was in no way inferior, or might have even exceeded him drastically. That was because when he was at Ling Han's age, he was only in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. That was only comparable to being a black-grade mid-level alchemist. But what about Ling Han? In martial arts, he had reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier as well. He was a really terrifying young man. No wonder his heart would throb with the feeling that Ling Han would be one of his greatest rivals in the future. Yet Ling Han did not pay them any attention. He merely continued to circulate the indestructible heaven scroll. The effects of the alchemical pills were also continuously taking effect, allowing his body to recover at a rapid rate. As long as he was not constantly being attacked by the flames, the indestructible heaven scroll could display its effects to the fullest. After about 10+ minutes, he stood back up. Though his injuries had not recovered completely, most of his injuries had. Ling Han, hand over the crimson red chilling ice grass to Xuan'er and I can spare your life, Yao Huiyu said calmly. He had said before that the next time he saw Ling Han, he would take the latter's life. The Rain Emperor immediately humphed and interrupted. I was just thinking to have a battle with you. He decisively accepted the challenge to battle in Ling Han's stead. Yet Ling Han smiled and said, Rain Emperor, just leave this battle to me. There was still half an hour left of the installation of power from the Black Tower, so how could it be wasted? Ha ha! Yao Huiyu laughed loudly, but as he laughed, he kept shaking his head. Though I have a high opinion of your potential, the current you is not acceptable. You are not yet qualified to battle me. You'd only find out after a battle. Ling Han waved the demon birth sword. Faint patterns appeared, and a terrifying pressure emanated from the sword. This kind of pressure had strong suppressive effects on any cultivator below the flower blossom tier, but its effects were limited against those upwards. After all, from that cultivation tier onwards, the cultivator had stepped beyond the limits of mortality. Yao Huiyu humphed and said, I was originally very expectant of the day that you will come to challenge me in the future, but if you insist to seek your own death, I do not mind granting your wish, either. He was someone who had no fear of killing in the first place. He did not have the habit of treasuring talent either. It was only a spur-of-the-moment kind of thing for him to make a 2-year promise with Ling Han, so naturally, he did not mind killing Ling Han before then. Mr. Yao, Grand Master Ling is an earth-grade alchemist, Xuan'er reminded coldly. Though she very much wanted the crimson-red chilling ice grass, she had no intention to take Ling Han's life for it. Moreover, the two of them were still supposed to head to the Middle State to battle together, and were allies. How could she possibly sit by and watch? Yao Huiyu smirked. Others might fear the Alchemist Society, but how could he? The internal workings of age-old sects like the Heaven Sword sect were far stronger than anyone dared to imagine. Even the Alchemist Society would not be willing to trifle with them easily. So what if he killed Ling Han? Could it be that the Alchemist Society would dare to come to Heaven's Sword sect to apprehend him? If you can block 3 sword strikes from me, I will spare you, he said darkly. Don't think that his heart had softened. It was an absolutely one-sided domination for one in the flower blossom tier against an opponent in the spiritual pedestal tier. Wouldn't 3 moves be enough to kill? Ling Han raised the demon birth sword levelly and answered calmly. You won't be able to kill me! These were honest words. Currently, he was, at any rate, in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, and at least before the installation of power from the Black Tower ended, he would be able to activate the peak period of the Flower Blossom tier level defense from the Thunder Battle Armor. As for when the installation of power from the Black Tower ended, naturally, he would then beckon over the Rain Emperor to take his place. He was definitely not a man who was willing to die for useless pride. First strike. Yao Huiyu acted. He casually waved his finger, merely forming 5 flashes of sword chi. But who was he? Not only was he in the Flower Blossom tier, he had also proclaimed himself as the 2nd strongest swordsman in the world. Though that was a bit of an exaggeration, his power in the Flower Blossom tier was still unbelievably strong. It was as if these 5 flashes of sword chi were furious dragons that could easily kill a cultivator in the 9th layer of the spiritual tier over 100 times. In the first place, the gap between the spiritual pedestal and the Flower Blossom tier was like the gap between heaven and earth, what more when it was the kind of monster that Yao Huiyu was. Ling Han was unafraid and waved his sword to parry. Pu. He could not slice apart Yao Huiyu's sword chi, but the Thunder Battle Armor managed to easily block all 5 flashes. Ling Han wasn't even forced back from the impact. Interesting. Yao Huiyu smiled. Previously, he had already seen the defensive ability that the Thunder Battle Armor displayed against flames, but being able to resist flames and being able to defend against a powerful attack were 2 completely different things. For example, an earthen wall could resist fire, but facing a powerful attack, it would definitely be broken. After this one strike, Yao Huiyu's thought that it was a fluke had disappeared. The Thunder Battle Armor could not only defend against fire and ice attacks, but was also effective against powerful attacks. He had to get serious. Yao Huiyu drew his sword, his expression serious. For someone as proud as he, since he had declared that he would strike 3 times, he was definitely not going to strike a 4th time. Otherwise, that would ruin the core of his art of the sword, and he could never possibly form sword heart in this lifetime. He once again waved his hand. Shio, 9 flashes of sword chi appeared simultaneously, and charged towards Ling Han. Pun! These flashes of sword chi were once again perfectly dispersed by the thunder battle armor. How could normal attacks be effective against defense at the level of the peak period of the flower blossom tier? Yao Huiyu's expression increased in seriousness. He did not mean to take Ling Han seriously at all, but the might of the latter's battle armor had exceeded his expectations. He had to use his best move, or he would really be unable to kill this young opponent. He took in a deep breath, and his treasured sword trembled slightly. Endless sword chi was exuded from all over his body, as if the wielder had also transformed into a sword. His body was the sword, his consciousness was the sword, all was the sword. Ling Han was greatly moved. In his last life, he had naturally not seen the Sword Emperor attack at full strength, and Yao Huiyu's trying his best now instantly gave him inspiration. So the path of the sword could be walked in this way too. He wanted to walk the path of the strongest, so naturally, he had to absorb the strongest points of various paths. Mysterious 3000, slashing all three realms. Yao Huiyu struck. Xiao, xiao, xiao. A total of 1,200 flashes of light actually shone with luster from the strike. Ling Han smiled. It was indeed the mysterious 3000. He had made the right bet. Chapter 424 A Narrow Victory. Chapter 424 A Narrow Victory. 1,200 sword flashes. This meant that Yao Huiyu had shot out 11 flashes of sword chi. That was how the total number of sword flashes reached the high point of 1,200. This was an extremely terrifying attack. A cultivator in the flower blossom tier was capable of shooting out 1,200 sword flashes, and every flash was equivalent to Yao Huiyu's full power attack. If these sword flashes crashed onto the thunder battle armor, they were perfectly capable of crushing its flower blossom tier level defense. They were too concentrated and too powerful. Ling Han was also slightly surprised. He had foreseen that when the first two strikes of Yao Huiyu produced no effect, he would definitely use the mysterious 3000 in the third strike. The latter's pride and self-esteem would not allow the words he had declared to fall empty. However, he had never thought that Yao Huiyu had indeed hidden his real ability. He had actually formed as many as 11 flashes of sword chi. He was indeed a very ambitious man. He had already formed 11 flashes of sword chi, yet did not choose to consolidate them into sword ray. Was he planning to form 29 flashes then? The Rain Emperor was also greatly stirred. He had formed fist ray only after he had formed 10 flashes of chi, but he had never thought that 10 flashes was not the limit at all. There was nothing to be done about that. Due to the limits of the power structure, there was no way that the Rain Emperor's understanding and knowledge about martial arts could compare with a disciple of Heaven's Sword sect. This had nothing to do with personal talent, but was rather due to the gap between their respective legacies. Ling Han moved and used the shadow wind motion, and actually managed to weave around the 1,200 sword flashes. Extremely coincidentally and very amazingly, he avoided one sword flash after another, heading towards Yao Huiyu in attack. That was too inconceivable. The Rain Emperor and Zhu Xuan'er could not help but gape. That was definitely Yao Huiyu's strongest attack. If it was them, even if Zhu Xuan'er broke through to the flower blossom tier, she would only be able to stay on the defense against such an attack. Otherwise, she could only choose to retreat early on to avoid facing such power directly. But soon after, they immediately shook their heads internally. That was 1,200 sword flashes. It was absolutely impossible to defend against. Unless they possessed an overwhelming advantage in cultivation level, that would be the only way they could parry what was equivalent to the fierce attack of 1,200 Tao Huiyu. The only option was to retreat and dodge. This was the conclusion that the two of them had reached, yet Ling Han did the exact opposite. He actually went straight up against the 1,200 sword flashes and charged towards Yao Huiyu to attack. But it seemed as if he could really succeed. He had already managed to dodge over 700 sword flashes. How could this scene not strike the Rain Emperor and Zhu Xuan'er dumb? Meanwhile, Tong Ximing was gritting his teeth as well, yet he felt as if the pain caused by the injury on his neck had increased slightly. Only Hunyo kept clapping her hands, calling out in praise. 800, 900, 1000, 1100, 1200. Ling Han actually managed to pass all 1200 sword flashes and arrived in front of Yao Huiyu. His sword streak passed, and he used the 4 seasons sword technique: spring, summer, autumn, and winter cycled. Pun! Yao Huiyu was struck and his figure was instantly flung backwards from the impact. However, multiple patterns lit up on his body, and when he touched the ground, there was only a very shallow wound on the left side of his face. Blood was seeping out, but it was as if it was mercury. It dripped slowly and exuded a silvery white light. Ling Han withdrew his sword. He managed to turn tables around in the final attack because he, too, had cultivated the mysterious 3000. Moreover, he had formed 9 flashes of sword chi himself, which was only 2 flashes of sword chi less than his opponent. As a result, he naturally knew how these sword flashes circulated, though the additional 200 flashes did give him some trouble. However, he did have the divine sense of the heaven tier after all, and his opponent was only in the flower blossom tier, so the additional 200 sword flashes were not too much of a problem. This was what led to a miracle. A cultivator of the 9th layer of spiritual pedestal tier overcame the strongest killing move of his flower blossom tier opponent, and managed to land his own attack. Even if he had only left behind a very tiny wound on Yao Huiyu's face, which was completely superficial. A hush fell all around them. The Rain Emperor was astonished. Zhu Xuan'er's beautiful eyes shone brightly, whereas Tong Jiming trembled. Only Hunyo was clapping her hands wildly and broke the silence with her applause. Yao Huiyu's expression changed repeatedly, but finally returned to impassiveness. He exuded an absolutely relaxed air and even smiled. He said, "Not bad, not bad. In my whole life, this is the first time that I have been wounded by someone who is 10 years younger than me. I've said before that I would only strike 3 times. Ling Han, there are still 20 months. Within these 20 months, even if I meet you once again, I will pretend that I have not seen you. However, 20 months later, no matter where you're hiding, I will find you and kill you. I will step on your corpse and break through to the 2nd level of my path of the sword." He had completely recovered his forceful manner and brimmed with confidence. He turned to Zhu Xuan'er and said, "Xuan'er, I'm sorry. I was not able to help you collect the spiritual herb, but please don't worry. I will immediately return to the middle state and definitely help you get spiritual herb." After saying so, he nodded at Tong Jiming, and the two of them turned around and left. Ling Han's eyes stayed on Yao Huiyu's figure. The next time they met, he would definitely not take advantage of the fact that he had an understanding of mysterious 3000. Instead, he would use real battle prowess to defeat this second coming of the Sword Emperor. Sword Emperor, it would be good if you had managed to enter the Realm of Gods. I shall definitely seek you out in the future for a good battle. Ling Han's confidence soared. He was certain that he would be able to break through to the Flower Blossom tier in 2 years' time. Grandmaster Ling, how much crimson red chilling ice grass do you need to use to concoct your alchemical pill? Please leave some for Xuan'er. Zhu Xuan'er bowed to Ling Han. Whether it was because of his identity as an Earth-grade alchemist or because of the battle prowess he currently possessed, she dared not use forceful means. Furthermore, she was most impressed by a genius of martial arts. Ling Han, with his cultivation of the 9th layer of spiritual ocean, though he had temporarily raised his cultivation to the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, was capable of wounding an elite cultivator of the flower blossom tier, especially when it was the kind of monster that Yao Huiyu was. It naturally filled her with an endless respect for him. Her beautiful eyes blazed, extremely enchanting. Meanwhile, the Rain Emperor smiled slightly and said, "Ling Han, I will still stay for some time in this dark devil forest, and when I reach the 9th layer of flower blossom tier, I will enter the other regions to travel. Therefore, if you encounter any trouble during this time, you can come here and look for me." "Many thanks, Rain Emperor." Ling Han raised his clasped hands in thanks. There was a protective screen that separated all 4 great regions and the middle state. A weaker person could freely pass through, but the higher one's cultivation, the harder it would be to pass through this barrier. For example, it was possible for a cultivator in the spiritual infant tier to pass through, but their cultivation would be greatly decreased. Thus, if one wanted to travel to the various regions and the middle state, the flower blossom tier was the best cultivation level for it. One would still be strong enough to ensure his own safety, yet would not be weakened in the process of passing through the barrier. The Rain Emperor looked over Ling Han and Zhu Xuan'er a few times, laughed loudly, and leaped through the air and left. Zhu Xuan'er's face reddened from the way he was looking at them. Thankfully, she had a white veil to cover her face, so no one could see how she currently resembled a peach. "Grandmaster Ling," she said to Ling Han shyly, her beautiful eyes clear and like honey, enough to make one's heart drunk with the sweetness. Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, "1 month later, bring enough origin crystals or other ingredients. Formation techniques would be all right as well. I can sell the crimson red chilling ice grass to you." If it was 1 month, there should be quite a few stalks of crimson red chilling ice grass in the Black Tower, so it would be fine to sell off 1 stalk. "Really?" Zhu Xuan'er asked, extremely excited. Ling Han revealed an impatient expression and countered, "I am an earth-grade alchemist. Do you think I would lie to a little girl like you?" Instantly, the corner of Zhu Xuan'er's mouth twitched, and she almost charged up to him to stab him with her sword. Chapter 425 Return to Extreme Yang City. Chapter 425 Return to Extreme Yang City. Zhu Xuan'er, ranked 13th in the prodigy roll of the North region. In the ranking tournament that would come about a month later, it was a sure thing for her to be ranked among the top 3. It was not an impossible thing for her to be ranked first even. Furthermore, she was the greatest beauty of the North region. Without even showing her whole face, she was capable of making the excellent disciples of Heaven's Sword sect be at her beck and call, trying their best to gain her favor. How enchanting was she to be able to do that? Yet someone actually ignored her charms and actually rebuked her as a little girl. Zhu Xuan'er was really very displeased. If Ling Han was an old man in his 50s or 60s, she would have nothing to say. But it was obvious that this guy was 3 or 4 years younger than herself, yet acted all aged and experienced. How could she not explode with anger? Most importantly, Ling Han's expression seemed to be so natural. He did not look at all like he was playing a cat and mouse game with her. This was practically like stabbing a few dozen times directly into Zhu Xuan'er's heart that had always been so confident. At this moment, she really felt a strong impulse to pull off her veil. She was sure that once Ling Han saw her magnificent beauty, he, too, would fall captive to her charms. However, firstly, she had never wanted to make use of her beauty, and secondly, she was more fearful that Ling Han would fall for her and use the crimson red chilling ice grass, or his status as an earth-grade alchemist, to force her to his will. Thus, she gritted her teeth and suppressed this kind of impulsive urge. "Grandmaster Ling, you look to be only 17 or 18 years old. If Xuan'er is a little girl, then what are you?" she countered. "Silly girl, whether one is mature or not is decided by one's mental age, not by the way one looks. I know already just by listening to you that you're really a silly girl." Ling Han shrugged, turned and left. Meanwhile, Hunyao made a face at Zhu Xuan'er, then caught up to Ling Han. Tugging on the corner of Ling Han's shirt, she giggled in laughter. "Damn! Damn! Damn!" Zhu Xuan'er felt like she was about to go crazy. How could there be such a man that would drive one to such anger? He was really too irritating, wasn't he? He really made one want to throw something at him, right? Ling Han was very satisfied. This trip to the Dark Devil Forest was practically perfect. Not only did he reap massive benefits from this journey, he had also managed to conjure a demon emperor and solve a huge problem. He had also met the Rain Emperor again. This dominating emperor had already set out on his path of a ruler, and his future achievements were boundless. He brought Hunyao with him back to Extreme Yang City. If Yin Lan already managed to obtain the 9-leaf black Ganoderma for him, he would be able to concoct the Restore Spirit pill. Zhu Xuan'er actually caught up with them and traveled alongside Ling Han. This made Hunyo very displeased. She felt that this woman that liked to move her behind as she walked was really too annoying. Why did she keep trying to seduce her Ling Han? Ling Han had already transplanted the crimson red chilling ice grass. Actually, this stalk of spiritual herb had yet to reach full maturity, but after growing in the Black Tower for over a dozen days, it should be mature enough. Thus, when Ling Han returned to Extreme Yang City, this stalk of spiritual herb was fully grown, but bore only 3 pieces of fruit. Yet the main stem very rapidly wilted, as if it had transferred all its life into these 3 pieces of fruit. The fruit could not be used. The value of the crimson red chilling ice grass lay in its stem. However, these 3 pieces of fruit meant that over a month later, Ling Han would be able to gain 3 stalks of 100-year-old crimson red chilling ice grass. At that time, he would use one and sell another to Xuan'er. He would leave the last to continue bearing fruit, and in the future, he would no longer be short of this spiritual herb. He returned to the inn, yet found out that Lu Yutong and the others had long moved out. However, they had left Bang an address for Ling Han with a waiter. Naturally, it was because Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan had decided, and finally found a new home for them. When they reached Extreme Yang City, Xuan'er floated away, whereas Lin Han went to his new home. It was located in the eastern part of the city. From the outside, it looked very ordinary, but there was actually a sizable lake inside. Willow trees hung over the lake, making for a very pleasant scenery. Furthermore, there were platforms and towers, water pavilions and stone bridges, making one feel as if one had found a spot of calm and chaos. They had actually even hired guards at the doorway. They halted Ling Han's advance. This made Hunyo display her ferocious true nature, and she almost bit them. Thankfully, Zhu Wujiu just happened to come out, and hurriedly welcomed Ling Han into the residence. He also informed the guards that this was the real owner of the Ling residence. They had also hired some servants to work in the manor. After all, the manor was extremely large, and Lu Yutong and the others had other matters they needed to do, primarily cultivation and pill concoction, so how would they have time to do trivial tasks? Soon, Lu Yutong and the others came out to receive him. Ling Han roughly grasped the current state of events. Whether it was Forget-Not or Alchemist King Pavilion, due to Lu Jitong's care, naturally no one dared to make any designs on them. However, because Ling Han had left for too long, the ingredients at Forget-Not were almost finished. From last month onwards, they had even used the method of selling those dishes that needed these ingredients, and limited the amount. Otherwise, they would have had no more ingredients to sell by now. It was the same for the Alchemist King Pavilion. The higher-grade alchemical pills that Ling Han had concocted were practically sold out, and although Li Si-chan had considerable talent in alchemy, she was still a very far way off from the alchemy emperor. Thankfully, Ling Han finally returned. Naturally, business matters had to be dealt with as soon as possible. Lin Han withdrew a large amount of fresh fruits and vegetables as well as some livestock from the Black Tower and told Zhu Wujiu to deliver them to Forget-Not. As for alchemical pills, when he had the time, he would enter into the Black Tower to concoct them. After all, they needed time to be concocted, and could not just be withdrawn like those food ingredients. When it was time for lunch, Gong Laiyan came without an invitation. He was already addicted to the good stuff sold in Forget-Not, yet after they limited the supply of dishes, he could only eat one excellent dish with each meal. How could his mouth, which had grown picky, tolerate this? Thus, he would come every day to join them for a meal because Lu Yutong and the others had long become picky as well and had to have dishes made with the food ingredients from the Black Tower for every meal. When he saw that Ling Han had returned, this guy immediately pounced on him and wailed, "Brother, you have finally come back. I'm almost about to die from waiting for your meat." Ling Han could not help but wear a dark expression. Did this guy know how to talk? He wanted to eat his flesh. Ling Han had returned today, so everyone naturally needed not continue conserving their supplies. Multiple kinds of gourmet dishes were served. They fiercely ate their meal, causing all of their stomachs to become rounded from the feast. After Gong Letian left, Ling Han gathered all of them around him. "This is the heavenly luck stone," Ling Han said, and explained the effects as well. This made everyone astonished. If they refined this small rock, then when they broke through to the next tier in future, they would gain an additional 4 or 5 battle stars worth of battle prowess? That was really too shocking. How could such a priceless treasure exist in this world? They were people of Rain Country, and due to their limited knowledge, they naturally could not have heard of such a treasure. Everyone was extremely excited. Even elite cultivators of the flower blossom and spiritual infant tier would fight over such a treasure so that they could help their own juniors raise their ability. But Ling Han actually managed to get as many as 9 pieces of such a rock. It was really astonishing. They were filled with gratitude and each swallowed a piece of heavenly luckstone. Once they broke through to the next major tier, their battle prowess would spike up a long way. This would be proven earliest through Liu Yutong and Zhu Wujiu, because they were both already on the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring tier. They had already strengthened their cultivation foundations close to perfection and were ready to break through. Qin Yi would be much slower. He had just broken through to the 2nd layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and still had a very long way to go until the spiritual pedestal tier. Guan Yuan was worse off. Because he was cultivating anew, he was indeed advancing at a faster rate than Qin Yi. However, because his cultivation had regressed, even if he once again broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, he would still only be recovering his original ability, and not breaking through. As a result, the benefits offered by the heavenly luckstone would only be visible when he broke through to the flower blossom tier. On the other side, Li Si-chan was unwilling to swallow the heavenly luckstone no matter what. To her, this was an extreme waste. She only needed the advancement of her cultivation level, and it would be enough for her to be able to concoct alchemical pills. For her, very powerful battle prowess was really not of much use. Chapter 426 Tiandu Thunderstar Array. Chapter 426 Tiandu Thunderstar Array. Ling Han did not coerce her, either. Having Li Si-chan refine the heavenly luckstone was indeed a bit of a waste. Since she did not need it, then they just put it aside for now. Anyways, no matter when, this kind of priceless treasure would be able to fetch an astronomical price. He headed to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and asked if there was any news about the 9-leaf black Ganoderma. The result of his queries brought him much unexpected joy. Yin Hong had already gotten some news about the 9-leaf black Ganoderma, and would be able to obtain it in another 1 or 2 months' time. There was nothing to be done about that. A level 7 spiritual herb was extremely valuable, and Yin Hong was only the beloved daughter of the pavilion master of the North Region branch of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, so she had limited means at her disposal. Most importantly, being the pavilion master of a branch of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion did not mean one had absolute authority. After all, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion was a very, very large party. It was just another 1 or 2 months' wait. Ling Han was still willing to wait. Moreover, about a month later, the prodigy role of the North Region would once again open up, and though Ling Han was not interested to participate, he might as well see how strong the prodigies of this era were. Right, do you still have any other array techniques? I can take out some cultivation or martial arts techniques to exchange for them, Ling Han said. Yin Hong rolled her eyes and replied, Don't talk to me in the tone that you use to speak with kids. Just take a look at the goods. Ling Han waved his right hand, and instantly, 10 books with martial arts techniques appeared on the table, every one of them earth grade. Yin Hong flipped through them and could not help but look shocked. She asked, Where did you steal so many martial arts techniques from? Don't you worry about that. Are you willing to trade? Ling Han said, smiling. Yin Hong could not help but be moved, but said, Didn't I give you a little Tianyuan spirit snake array previously? I already learned that, Ling Han said very casually. Pooh! Yin Hong instantly spat out a mouthful of tea. Already learnt? What kind of joke was he playing here? That was a level 4 array technique, and you already learned it in a few months' time? One had to understand that array techniques could not be learned overnight. One had to first learn level 1 array patterns, followed by level 2, level 3, then level 4. Ordinarily, 1 or 2 months would be enough to learn level 1 array patterns, but level 2 would at least need 1 or 2 years, level 3 would require 4 to 5 years, and level 4 would at least need over 10 years to be learned successfully. It would be easy in the beginning, but the further one advanced, the slower the rate of improvement. Thus, array techniques were only support techniques, and no one would actually only cultivate array techniques. Yin Hong could also be considered a genius of array techniques, yet even she had spent 3 whole months to fully grasp the little Tianyuan spirit snake array, and this was still based on the fact that she had already grasped a large amount of level 4 array patterns. "You're bluffing!" She did not believe him. Ling Han smiled slightly and spread out his right hand. 7 golden patterned rods appeared, and the little Tianyuan spirit snake array appeared in his consciousness. Instantly, the power of nature gushed forth, and a white snake suddenly appeared. "What?" Yin Hong stood up abruptly, her beautiful eyes wide. You are practically a monster! Hey, even if we know each other well, I will still get angry if you insult me like that," Ling Han said, smiling. Yin Hong still looked dumbfounded and said, "I thought that I was a genius of array techniques, but when compared with you, I feel like I'm an idiot." "True, I am a genius." Ling Han nodded. Yin Hong could not help but sigh. "Can't you be a little modest?" "This is the truth. If I act modest, that would be being pretentious. Acting pretentious is something that only bastards would do," Ling Han said in mock seriousness. Yin Hong instantly broke out in laughter, and as she laughed, her beautiful body shook with her peals of laughter, without worrying if she would ignite Ling Han with her voluptuous movements, or that he would be overcome by lust and push her down. After a while, she said seriously, "With your level in array techniques, perhaps you may be even more impressive than I am a year later, and can take my place as the main force in the array techniques competition. Then you'd have to increase my pay," Ling Han said seriously. Yin Hong rolled her lovely eyes at him and said, "Just a few words of praise and you're over the moon already? However, be it for array technique, alchemy, or martial arts, every region can send 3 people, and the one who has achieved the best result will be used in the judgment. The higher your achievements in array techniques, the higher the possibility of us getting higher marks in array techniques. All right, I'll trade with you." She drew out an ancient book and placed it in front of Ling Han. "Tiandu Thunderstar Array." Ling Han cast a glance over it. These words were written on the book's cover. "A level 5 array technique," Yin Hong declared, her expression somber. "However, this is the highest level of array technique that I can obtain. In the case of level 6 array techniques, I am not yet qualified to learn. But even if I have, I could not possibly teach you either. There are very strict rules about that." Yet Ling Han was pleased. The might of a level 5 array technique was equivalent to the spiritual pedestal tier, and he was only a hair's breadth away from breaking through to the spiritual pedestal tier. Level 4 array techniques, on the other hand, were not of much help, as very soon, they would not be useful to him anymore. Deal. He grabbed the book of array techniques and left. Yin Hong could not help but grit her teeth. She was, in any case, a great beauty, and was naturally charming in disposition. Was this brat blind? The reason why Ling Han was able to advance so fast on the path of array techniques naturally was related to the fact that he had a sliver of the divine sense left behind from the heaven tier. Furthermore, he had entered into various ancient historical sites in his last life, so had studied much about array techniques. Thus, he had not begun from absolute zero. He flipped through the book. This Tiandu Thunderstar array could induce the attack of lightning, and it was divided into 2 versions. One version was the main array, which needed one to lay out 136 array stones. Even a level 5 array master was not able to control it freely, and could only set it up as a dead array. A so-called dead array was similar to the Mountain Protection Great Array. It could only be set up in a certain location, and would only be activated when an intruder entered into the bounds of the array. The advantage was that it was completely automatic and possessed great force. There were also a lot of disadvantages, however. Firstly, it could not be moved, so once it was set up somewhere, it would stay there. Secondly, it could not differentiate between enemies and friends, so one wrong step, and he could still activate the array to attack him. I could set up one here. It could block any enemies at the level of the spiritual pedestal tier, Ling Han mumbled. However, there were 136 array stones needed. How many materials would that need? He was definitely unable to set it up for the time being. There was another version which was a supplementary array. The power of this array was much smaller, but it only needed 36 array stones. It could be considered as the compact version of the main array. The advantage of this array was that it could be actively controlled completely by the array master, and he could command it to attack as he desired, just like the little Tianyuan spirit snake array. Looks like I'm going to have to spend a lot. Thankfully, 3 bone-forming pills had been auctioned off for 7,000 2-star origin crystals, as well as a dozen over 1,000 1-star origin crystals, which would be enough to buy them. Ling Han huffed out a breath of air. Looking at things, array techniques were also extremely costly, and were not that much better than alchemy. However, though array masters could also earn money by helping another to set up a great array, once the array was set up, it could be used for more than 100, or even 1,000, 10,000 and more years. It was not a consumable item like alchemical pills. As a result, array masters most probably did not earn as much money as alchemists. Thankfully, I am the alchemy emperor. Otherwise, if I want to cultivate martial arts and have to refine array stones as well, how else would I earn so much money to burn? Ling Han shook his head. As he walked on the streets, he could clearly see that there were considerably more cultivators around him. The Northern Region Prodigy Tournament was about to begin, which would naturally attract cultivators to come. Some were here to participate in the tournament, whereas some were here to watch the excitement. Shui Gu Cheng, battle with me! A large shout was heard from somewhere ahead of him. You maniac, this is a busy street in the city. If we battle here, how many people would die? Both of us would be chased out of Extreme Yang City, an angry voice yelled back. Now that my battle spirit has arisen, I don't care about so much. Come battle! A figure leaped up high. The figure was quite small in build, yet was wielding a heavy hammer that was much taller than him. Merely the hammer was taller and wider than his body. Idiot! Another person leaped up and jumped onto the roof of a building, then left quickly. Chapter 427 Stomping onto Ji De Rong. Chapter 427 Stomping onto Ji De Rong. Shui Gu Qing, ranked 20th on last year's prodigy roll, cultivation level at the second layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. However, from what he could see today, he was shockingly already at the 4th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. That was very normal. Beneath the flower blossom tier, there was a large number of alchemical pills that could speed up cultivation rate. There would definitely be powerful sects to support these kinds of geniuses, so they were absolutely capable of producing an overwhelming change in their cultivation in a year's time. And if it was not because he was worried that he would spoil things through excessive enthusiasm, Shui Gu Cheng's cultivation could possibly be even higher. For example, Zhu Xuan'er's information indicated that she was only in the second layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, yet now, she had shockingly advanced to the 5th layer. To these prodigies, their cultivation would differ greatly after every few months, so if one still looked at them based on the previous judgment, they would definitely be deceived. The person ranked after Shui Gu Qing was Ji De Rong, and according to the information on the records, Ji De Rong was unwilling to accept his ranking. Thus, he would challenge the former every single time they met. That small figure just now must be Ji De Rong, which fit his description on the records very well. As the time for the Prodigy Tournament grew nearer, more and more characters from various backgrounds were beginning to show up. Ling Han shook his head. Qin Yi, Lu Yutong, and Zhu Wujiu all wanted to take part in the Prodigy Tournament this time. Moreover, they were very ambitious. Not only did they want to get onto the ranking list, they also wanted to fight for a high ranking, but from the look of things now, they did not have much hope. Initially, Qin Ye's cultivation was the highest, and he had the highest chance of getting a good position in the rankings. However, he had already broken through to the spiritual ocean tier before he refined the heavenly luck stone. Thus, unless he broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, there would be no way for the heavenly luck stone to have effect on him. Thus, his current ability to challenge a superior opponent was at most equal to Zhu Wujio's after the latter broke through to the spiritual ocean tier, and was far beneath Lu Yutong after she broke through to the spiritual ocean tier. If he was not able to gain an overwhelming advantage in terms of cultivation level, his battle prowess was definitely not as strong as Lu Yutong's. As Ling Han mused, he continued to walk towards Forget-Not. It was almost time for lunch. However, when he reached the restaurant, he shockingly saw that someone had punched a large hole into one of the side walls of the restaurant. It was currently under repair, so there was not one customer inside the restaurant. He frowned and asked, "What's going on here?" Just now, there were two maniacs fighting. One of them was hit, and his body crashed this way, creating a large hole in the restaurant's wall. Thankfully, he only injured a few waiters, there were no fatalities, Zhu Wujio said very gloomily. Ling Han was instantly angered and asked, "Did one of them have a small build, holding onto a hammer?" "Yes." Zhu Wujio nodded, then asked in shock, "How did young Master Han know?" Ling Han did not answer his question, and instead turned around and left. "Young Master Han, where are you going?" Zhu Wujio hurriedly caught up with him. "Naturally to find those two bastards and call them to accounts, asking for compensation," Ling Han said with a dark expression. "Young Master Han, those two are ranked on the prodigy roll, and both are in the spiritual pedestal tier. One is ranked 20th, whereas the other is ranked 21st, Zhu Wujio said with a trembling voice. He had not known previously, but when he heard the discussions of passers-by later, he found out that those two maniacs actually had such impressive backgrounds. Ling Han did not even turn his head and said, "So what? I'll give them a thrashing first, then drag them back to work for a month." Zhu Wujio could not help but shiver. He knew that Ling Han was very powerful and had astonishing battle prowess. But there was still a large gulf of a whole major cultivation tier between them. Furthermore, Shui Guqing and Ji De Rong were both characters on the prodigy roll, and similarly had impressive ability to challenge a stronger opponent than themselves. They were not to be trifled with. "You stay here. There needs to be someone on standby at the restaurant," Ling Han said darkly. "Yes, yes," Zhu Wujio nodded. When he recalled that Ling Han was an Earth-grade alchemist, he could not help but relax internally. Even if the person ranked first in the prodigy roll came, they'd still have to lower their heads and address him respectfully as Grand Master when they saw Ling Han. How could he have forgotten that? He'd spent so much time worrying it pointlessly. Ling Han strode forwards, and made queries all the way. Shui Guqing and Ji De Rong were battling furiously, so they naturally left a trail of witnesses behind them. At this moment, they were all discussing heatedly, so there was no need for Ling Han to deliberately ask as they were all talking about it. Thus, Ling Han very easily followed the battle trail that the two had left behind, but after over a dozen minutes, he heard a passerby say that the two had already concluded their battle and returned to their respective residences. Ling Han first followed that shorty with a small build holding a hammer. He queried all the way, and arrived in front of an inn. He gave a large shout, and called out, "Shorty G, get out here!" The inn that had been very noisy immediately became very quiet. What was going on here? Someone actually dared tell someone ranked 21st on the prodigy roll to get out, calling him Shorty G? That was practically poking a hornet's nest, right? Who did not know that even though Ji De Rong was not ranked first on the prodigy roll, in terms of fiery temper, he was definitely one of the top 3. Pun! True enough, a moment later, a window was crashed open, and a small figure leaped out. Initially, it was not possible for him to create much damage with such a small figure, but who asked him to have a huge hammer slung on his shoulder? Due to the collision, he had practically split the whole room into 2 halves. "What bastard dares to insult your Lord Ji?" Ji De Rong's eyes were wide with anger. To be able to stay on the prodigy roll, he could only be 30 years old at most, but looking at his whole face that was completely concealed by his sideburns and beard, he looked to be 40 years old or above. Ling Han walked over and said, "You idiot, you damaged my restaurant. I am here to take you back to work as a waiter." "Ha ha!" When Ji De Rong heard his words, he was initially dumbfounded, then laughed loudly. He had not heard wrongly, had he? Someone was actually here to capture him to work in their restaurant as a waiter? He looked Ling Han over a few times and said, "You are quite interesting, but you should not joke around with your Lord Ji. Joking your sister." Ling Han leaped over, then raised one foot into the air, which headed in a kick towards Ji De Rong's face. "Insolence!" Ji De Rong was enraged. Though he admired Ling Han's sense of humor, this young man actually dared to kick him. This was really too daring for him. He decided to make Ling Han suffer a little, but he would spare the latter's life, so that he could tell him a few jokes and relieve his boredom. He moved and casually grabbed Ling Han's foot. But his expression immediately changed greatly, because this kick from Ling Han possessed terrible force behind it, which gave rise to a cold feeling in him. Fuck, was this really a young man in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? Pun! A foot landed solidly onto Ji De Rong's face. Due to the great force behind it, he was undoubtedly trampled onto the ground. Ping! Instantly, a hold appeared on the ground as his whole head had sunk into the ground. There was much destructive power behind this kick. So what if Ji De Rong was someone ranked on the prodigy roll? The impact still knocked him unconscious. His limbs drooped uselessly around him, and he looked like a dead dog. Those around them had all paled in shock. There was a considerable number of cultivators in this inn. Some were here to take part in the upcoming prodigy tournament, while some were here to watch the tournament. Naturally, they all recognized who Ji De Rong was. But it was precisely this young elite that was knocked unconscious by one stomp of someone's foot. This instantly made a great number of people who had intended to take part in the tournament think of withdrawing. My gosh, with such a monster there, what was the point in participating? He could teach them the harshness of reality at any moment. All of a sudden, their surroundings were completely silent. Chapter 428 Finding Shui Guqing Again. Chapter 428 Finding Shui Guqing Again. Dark Angel _ Interesting. There was an open window on the 3rd floor of the inn, and a tall, slender man could be seen through it. He looked to be about 30 years old, but was extremely handsome. His hair was black and thick as well. He belonged to the category of extremely handsome, dashing young man that would make a woman go crazy. Yu Kunlun, ranked first on the prodigy roll. However, he had just passed 30 years of age, and so was no longer qualified to participate in the prodigy tournament this year. Junior sister, this person should be one of your strongest opponents in the prodigy tournament, he said, turning his head. There was a girl standing beside the window too. She had a deity-like graceful bearing, with a shapely body which would draw covetous eyes to her. There was a thin silk veil hiding her face, but her beautiful features could vaguely be seen. Her black hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall, and her complexion was fair like the most beautiful jade. She could easily stir up one's heart. She looked down below and said disdainfully, "Firstly, Ji De Rong was too careless. He completely had not thought that a person in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier would have the battle prowess at the level of the spiritual pedestal tier. Secondly, Ji De Rong's battle prowess is only worth 10 battle stars. Junior sister really has high aspirations. 10 battle stars of battle prowess is only judged as only in your eyes." Yu Kunlun laughed loudly, and the eyes that looked upon that girl were obviously filled with adoration. This was an extreme genius that had just recently risen from the Great Mercy sect. Her name was Huang Han. She was only 22 years old this year, but her cultivation had already reached the 3rd layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. She had not participated in the prodigy tournament last year because her cultivation level at that time was too low, and it was only 2 years ago that she suddenly rose up powerfully. She advanced all the way at a terrifying speed, which alerted the higher ranks of the Great Sorrow sect. Currently, she was already included on the list of core disciples to be heavily developed by the sect. Yu Kunlun had come this time firstly to watch the battles, and secondly to serve as a protective escort for Huang Han. Huang Han acted as if she had not seen Yu Kunlun's adoring gaze upon her. Her aspirations were too high. Even if Yu Kunlun was currently ranked first on the prodigy roll, she was still unmoved. She idolized those geniuses from the middle state. She heard just 2 months ago that a genius from the middle state had appeared and had a great battle with the golden blood demonic ape in the dark devil forest, and even the flower blossom tear cultivators from the older generation paled in comparison to his brilliance. That was a real dragon amongst humans. On a tower farther away, Xinzhong Cheng's hand uncontrollably gripped the hilt of his sword, and his eyes that looked upon Ling Han were filled with battle spirit. He had already broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier since he was unable to obtain the heavenly luck stone. He could only break through when he had perfected his cultivation level. This young man would be worth a battle. Even further away, there was a plump young man who had squeezed into the crowd. He quietly moved and noiselessly removed the spatial ring from the hand of a young man at the spiritual pedestal tier. He walked to one side, giggled and said, "That tanned brother of mine seemed to have become stronger and stronger. Ling Han, we've met again." On another tall tower, Yan Tianzhao's figure appeared. At this moment, the aura exuding from him was shockingly that of the peak period of the spiritual pedestal tier. A green-colored light flickered within his eyes, and took form into various patterns which were extremely strange-looking. Ling Han picked Ji De Rong up, and with a wave of his hand, the blood-sucking origin gold was drawn. He used it to tie up the legs of the shorty, then went back the way he came. Chilla, like a piece of dirt cloth, Ji De Rong was dragged off by him. The spectators all hissed. That was an elite of the spiritual pedestal tier, and moreover someone on the prodigy roll. In the future, as long as he did not fall, he would definitely break through to the flower blossom tier. Yet he dragged him like he was a damned dog. Was that really proper? However, Ling Han was completely uncaring. It was not that he had never offended anyone in the flower blossom tier. Let's make a count. Ao Feng was one, Elder Nine Clouds was one, Yao Huiyu was another, so how could he fear someone that would only break through to the flower blossom tier in the future? He was now going off to find Shui Cheng. Since these two damaged his restaurant and wounded his staff, then before his employees recovered, these two guys would have to become waiters in his restaurant in compensation. This kick that Ji De Rong suffered was really heavy. He had actually not regained consciousness even when he was being dragged like this. Thankfully, spiritual pedestal tier cultivators endlessly used their origin power to refine their physical bodies, so they definitely had tough, sturdy skin, so it was all right even if he was being dragged along in this manner. Otherwise he would have already been badly mangled. Ling Han made queries about where Shui Cheng had gone. When they saw that he was dragging a person behind him, the person he asked was a bit troubled, and dared not tell him. However, there were some who were motivated by the desire to see the world in chaos who happily told him where he could find Shui Cheng, and even took the initiative to lead him there. Shui Cheng was currently having an enjoyable time in the Listen to the Rain Pavilion. Listen to the Rain Pavilion. This was an extremely luxurious money-squandering establishment of the city. However, because payment could be settled with gold and silver, it was not such a big deal to cultivators. Any amount of gold and silver was only worldly objects, so they would naturally spend it freely for fun and entertainment. Ling Han was dragging the elite cultivator currently ranked 21st on the prodigy roll as he walked openly in the streets. This naturally caused a commotion and attracted more and more people to follow behind him, laughing all the way. This joke was really too big. Who is this young man that is actually capable of defeating Ji De Rong? Not sure. However, it's not because he is really stronger than Ji De Rong, but rather it was Ji De Rong who was too careless and provided him an opening that he could take advantage of. But no matter how careless he was, he's still a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator. Now that we're on the subject, didn't the White-Robed Sword King also defeat quite a number of spiritual pedestal tier cultivators when his cultivation level was only at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? How could those spiritual pedestal tier cultivators compare with Ji De Rong? Furthermore, another year has passed, so no matter what, Ji De Rong's cultivation would have increased considerably, and he is definitely not one who can be defeated by an opponent in the spiritual ocean tier. You're making me more and more curious. Who exactly is this young man? Everyone were discussing and chatting noisily, all of them very curious. How did such a monstrous young man appear so suddenly? It was obvious that there would be a place for Ling Han in the new round of the Prodigy tournament. Furthermore, his rank would definitely not be low either. Perhaps he might even be able to suppress the high rank that the white-robed Sword King had achieved 3 years ago. Firstly, Ling Han was stronger, and secondly, a great number of people had passed 30 years old and were taken off the Prodigy roll. Ling Han walked in front, whereas the crowd walked behind. This troop was really quite majestic, and they walked all the way to the Listen to the Rain pavilion. "Toothpick Shui, get out here!" Ling Han similarly called out like he had done previously. His voice was like thunder, and no matter how loud the music and dancing was inside, it could not conceal his thunderous volume. "Ji De Rong, you bastard! If you want to fight, I am willing to oblige, but in another month, you're going to die." Shui Guqing's furious voice was heard, and within a short while, he had rushed out. Shui Guqing was much better than Ji De Rong appearance-wise. He had a slender, tall build, and a noble, dignified air around him. His brown skin looked like he had had oil rubbed on his skin. When he rushed out, he realized that something was off. Ji De Rong was actually being dragged on the ground as if he was a dead dog. How could this be possible? He turned to look at Ling Han. In terms of power, he was actually on equal footing with Ji De Rong. The power gap between the two of them was really too small. If Ling Han was able to defeat Ji De Rong, then naturally he would be able to defeat him too. Who wanted to be embarrassed in public? Thus, unless there was no other option for it, he definitely did not want to get into a battle with Ling Han. "Young man, where have I offended you?" Shui Guqing asked seriously. Ling Han humphed, delivered another kick to Ji De Rong, and said, "You and this idiot were fighting right out in the open street, and damaged the wall of my restaurant. You two also caused injuries to a few of my staff. It is precisely a busy time when there is a shortage of staff. Thus, I can only take the two of you back so that you can work as waiters for a month as replacement." When everyone heard this, they felt the corners of their mouths twitch. For such a trivial, minuscule matter, he actually thrashed an elite cultivator on the Prodigy roll to the extent that he resembled a dead dog? If Ji De Rong knew, he would definitely holler curses. When had elite cultivators on the Prodigy roll become so cheap that they would actually be put on par with ordinary waiters? Chapter 429 Capturing to Work. Chapter 429 Capturing to Work. Dark Angel _ After getting a kick, Ji De Rong finally woke up. His eyes snapped open, yet was still a little confused. However, he immediately realized that something was off, and shouted loudly all of a sudden. "You brat, aren't you going to quickly let go of your grandpa, Ji? Let us have a grand battle of 300 rounds. A defeated opponent still dares to speak bold words?" Ling Han gave him another kick. "Ah, pay. That's because your grandpa Ji was too careless. Otherwise, a brat in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier like you, Grandpa Ji would be able to crush you with one hand behind my back." Yet Ji De Rong continued to swear with absolutely no intention of admitting his defeat. Ling Han did not pay any further attention to him, but instead turned towards Shui Guqing and said, "You come over here and allow me to give you a good thrashing. Then I'll bring you back to work as a waiter in my restaurant." "Hung!" Shui Guqing sneered. When he heard Ji De Rong's words, he finally knew what was going on here. Ling Han was indeed very strong, but he was only in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Ji De Rong had indeed been careless. And who was he? Shui Guqing, ranked 20th on the Prodigy roll. At that time, the white-robed Sword King was enough of a monster, right? Yet wasn't he still ranked after him? And now, he was in the 3rd layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, with battle prowess soaring straight up to 8 battle stars, so how could a mere cultivator in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier stand against that? "Then I shall come teach you a lesson," he said with a smile. Ji De Rong had been defeated by Ling Han, and if he now defeated Ling Han, how could Ji De Rong still have the face to challenge him to a fight again in future? Facing a boor like Ji De Rong, in truth, Shui Guqing felt very troubled. Ling Han waved his hand and 7 golden rods appeared. Wang, the array was activated and a white snake appeared in thin air. It gushed into Ling Han's body and forcibly increased his battle prowess by another 2 battle stars. Array Master? Shui Guqing was shocked. In this era, there were pitifully few array masters. They were even rarer than alchemists. However, they definitely should not be underestimated. Ling Han once again drew the demon birth sword. A lot of people had seen it before in the dark demonic forest anyways, so he couldn't bother to continue keeping it under wraps. The strongest cultivators in the north region were at most in the spiritual infant tier, and faced with his status as an earth-grade alchemist, they at least dared not snatch it from him in public. As for cultivators stronger than that, they could not make their way here. Even if they did, their prowess would be greatly suppressed and weakened. Before attempting such a journey, anyone would have to consider carefully if such a price was worth it. Shui Guqing instantly felt his knees become a little weak. Even if merely a sliver of aura seeped out of a level 10 spirit tool, how could it be ordinary? And that was still thanks to the fact that he had formed 7 flashes of qi and entered into the ranks of rulers, so there was not too serious an effect on him. Come battle! Ling Han smiled calmly. Shui Guqing felt a headache coming on. His opponent had an array as well as a high-level spirit tool. It appeared he had a terrifying background behind him. It seemed like he could draw out another priceless treasure at any time, which made his self-confidence take a sharp drop. But there was no turning back now. In front of so many people, how could he possibly shy away from battle? If it's a fight you want, then I shall oblige. With a great leap he pounced. A cold light surged forth, and he, too, had drawn a spirit tool of his own. It was a long saber, and he slashed it furiously at Ling Han. No matter what, he was indeed much superior in terms of cultivation level, so he was at an absolute advantage in power. Thus, he had cast aside all kinds of flashy moves, intending to have a clash of brute force with Ling Han. This was the surest way for him to win this battle. Ling Han used the 4-seasoned sword technique. Sword intent of the various seasons gushed forth in a continuous cycle, circulating according to his will. Compared with Lord Ji's instant defeat, Shui Guqing's condition was much, much better. At least he was capable of exchanging a number of blows with Ling Han, which made Ji De Rong extremely displeased. Didn't this mean that he was inferior to Shui Guqing then? Brat, you really do have some skill! Shui Guqing's true skill was forced out bit by bit. He no longer dared to have the slightest reservation. This young man was really much, much too strong. Ling Han, on the other hand, moved smoothly and skillfully. Though the benefits brought by the heavenly luck stone were not visible yet, after the installation of power from the Black Tower, there was an extremely big upgrade to his physique, and his personal battle prowess was on a completely different level from before. Who knew how much higher his current battle prowess was compared to 20 battle stars of the spiritual ocean tier? After all, he was capable of shaking an opponent with 8 battle stars in spiritual pedestal tier. This was something unbelievable to a great many of the spectators. The spectators all around them were already struck dumb. This was really too much of a monster, right? There was Qing in the last round, but even he could only stand against an opponent in the first layer of the spiritual pedestal tier when his cultivation level was the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Yet Ling Han could stand on equal grounds with a cultivator at the 3rd layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, which forcefully raised the record by 2 whole levels. Drawing the saber to cut water, destroying emotion and cutting off roots. Shui Guqing shouted loudly and used a great move. His long saber slanted, and 7 flashes of saber qi surged, actually bringing along with them over 100 saber images that gushed forth towards Ling Han. Ling Han was slightly surprised. This saber technique was a bit like the mysterious 3000. However, his opponent's saber qi could only form over a dozen saber images, which was far from being capable of equaling the might of the mysterious 3000. Still, in terms of essence, these 2 techniques were the same. Indeed, there was no shortage of ability in the world. However, the inheritance of the Heaven's Sword sect could even be related to the realm of gods, and had existed for millennia without deteriorating. It was naturally not something that other sects could compare with. Ling Han did not step back, but rather advanced. At the very moment that his opponent used such a huge move, it was also the very same moment when his defense was at its weakest. When they saw that Ling Han actually went forth against the saber images, everyone was astonished. Though everyone knew that this moment was the time when Shui Gu Cheng's defense was the weakest, the problem was, with such a terrifying attack ahead, after forcefully parrying so many saber flashes, he himself would be severely wounded, so how could he still possibly be able to launch his own attack on Shui Gu Cheng? But what shocked them was that Ling Han's figure waved and bent as if he was a withered leaf dancing in the wind. His nimble movements allowed him to weave smoothly around all obstructions in his way and appear in front of Shui Gu Cheng. He was now capable of shooting out 1,000 sword flashes, and so was naturally very familiar with this kind of attack. Additionally, he also had the divine sense of the heaven tier, which allowed him to successfully accomplish what to everyone seemed to be an impossible feat. Pun! Ling Han shot out a fist, which solidly landed on Shui Gu Cheng's face. Aya! Shui Gu Cheng yelled in pain, and was instantly knocked over onto the ground. He had passed out completely from the blow. With a wave of his hand, the blood-sucking origin galls became even longer and thinner. Ling Han tied Shui Gu Cheng up as well. Who is so bold that dares to make trouble at my listen to the rain pavilion? An arrogant voice was heard, and a young man walked out of the tower. But the moment he saw Ling Han, his whole body shook, and he dared not utter one more word. Instead, he simply turned around and fled. It was precisely Lu Qiyuan. How could he not be afraid of Ling Han? He hadn't even done anything. He had only threatened him a bit, and went to his restaurant one time, yet was almost beaten to death by his own grandfather. And to give Ling Han an explanation, his grandfather had even destroyed the Lang clan. That was a god of misfortune. Whoever dared trifle with him would be hit with bad luck. There were naturally some who recognized Lu Qiyuan among the crowds, and when they saw him behave like a mouse that had encountered a cat when he saw Ling Han, they all were shocked. In terms of martial arts and power, Ji De Rong and Shui Gu Cheng were naturally far superior to Lu Qiyuan, but in terms of status, as the grandson of an earth-grade alchemist, the latter did not have a low status and was in fact a local bully around these parts. Yet even Lu Qiyuan was so scared of Ling Han. Exactly what background did this young man have? Ling Han merely smiled. Dragging Shui Gu Cheng and Ji De Rong behind him, he left. Brat, release your grandpa Ji this instant! Ji De Rong yelled. His cultivation had been sealed by Ling Han, so he could only crawl on the ground with 2 hands like a dog. Though it looked a bit pathetic, it was still better than being dragged off. Speak less rubbish and obediently work for me for a month! Ling Han humphed. Chapter 430 Special Training. Chapter 430 Special Training. Dark Angel _ When they saw Ling Han return dragging 2 dead dogs behind him, everyone in Forget-Not were dumbfounded. That was too awesome, wasn't it? Those 2 were geniuses close to the top 20 on the prodigy roll, and Ling Han simply knocked them out just like that. By now, Lu Yutong and the others had returned as well. Naturally, they were made aware of the situation and they, too, were extremely shocked. Ling Han actually managed to easily capture 2 elite cultivators on the prodigy roll. That kind of battle prowess was really too astonishing. Ling Han withdrew the blood-sucking origin gold and said, Wu Jiu, you watch over them and have them work hard. If they dare to goof off, give them a good thrashing. There's no need to be reserved. He had already sealed off both their cultivation. Yes. Chu Wujiu hurriedly nodded. Since that was what Ling Han had said, then no matter what, he would obey. Who cared what sect or faction stood behind these 2? Shui Gu Cheng returned to consciousness, but with his cultivation sealed, he could only bow his head and concede. Otherwise, if he was really thrashed by a minor character like Zhu Wujiu, how could he bear with the humiliation? Ji De Rong had complained the whole way, but had also become obedient. The both of them really did obediently carry trays and serve dishes. They had really become waiters in the restaurant. The hole in the wall had been temporarily blocked up, and the restaurant was once again in business. As it was well known, there was naturally no shortage of customers, and there were some who had followed Ling Han all the way here. When they saw that there were 2 elites on the prodigy roll working as waiters here, how could they not come in for a meal too? In the future, if they said that they had once been served by someone on the prodigy roll before, wouldn't that attract massive amounts of envy? When they got hold of the menu, they first experienced a shock. What kind of damn thing was this? The price of one dish was actually 1 origin crystal? But when they saw that so many others had already placed their orders, added together with the fact that the aroma was indeed tempting, they, too, could not help but order a dish to have a taste. There was naturally no need to explain the result of their decision. "Waiter, give me another serving of this extreme treasure." "Me too." "Here too." Shui Guqing and Ji De Rong really wanted to cry but had no tears left. Just think, the 2 of them were ranked elite cultivators on the prodigy roll, yet they had now fallen to the level of waiters carrying serving trays. What was even more depressing was the fact that the business of this place was extremely booming, which made them race and scramble back and forth. This was even more tiring than fighting in a battle. "How many of you want to take part in the prodigy tournament?" On the 3rd floor, Ling Han asked the group. "Me! Me! Me!" Lu Yutong and the others all raised their hands. Except for Li Si-chan and Guan Yuan, everyone expressed their desire to participate. Even Hu Niu raised her small hand high up into the air. Ling Han gave them a look over. Ken Yu was now in the 3rd layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and had 9 battle stars of battle prowess. Lu Yutong was in the 1st layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and her battle prowess was 10 battle stars. Zhu Wujiu was in the 1st layer of the spiritual ocean tier, with battle prowess of 9 battle stars. He said, "There is still about a month's time. Let me think of how to give you guys some special training and help you all increase your battle prowess to at least 15 battle stars. Otherwise, it'd be better for you not to go and embarrass yourselves. There's just 1 month, can we really improve so much?" Lu Yutong was a little disbelieving. Ling Han showed off what looked to be the smile of a demon and replied, "Believe me, as long as you all will not have died, it will not be difficult for you to reach 15 battle stars." When they saw that kind of smile on his face, Lu Yutong and the others all shivered, feeling coldness wrap around their entire bodies. They felt a strong sense of foreboding. Ling Han rubbed Hu Niu's head and said, "From the looks of the current situation, only Niu would be able to get into the ranks, and it would not be hard for her to make it into the top 10. He paused a moment, then said, "If Niu breaks through to the spiritual pedestal tier, then the 1st place would be in the bag." "Hee hee!" Hu Niu laughed proudly, showing off her little white teeth. Lu Yutong and the others were all astonished. They had never imagined that Ling Han would judge Hu Niu so highly. This was just a 6-year-old little girl. Moreover, Hu Niu was going to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier? Hiss! "Wait, young Master Han, are you not participating?" Zhu Wujiu asked blankly. "Che, there's no prize, so why would I participate?" Ling Han fanned his hand, waving off the question. Ken Yu was shocked and exclaimed, "Young Master Han, being able to rank onto the prodigy roll represents the ultimate glory." Ling Han merely smiled. As someone who had once been the Alchemy Emperor and an elite cultivator of the Heaven tier in his last life, did he need a ranking on the prodigy roll to prove himself? Moreover, after he had met Yao Huiyu, he had increasingly not taken this prodigy roll seriously. "Niu is enough. Get 1st place, give Ling Han," Hu Niu declared, patting her little chest. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "All right, then this time will depend on Niu." 2 geniuses on the prodigy roll had actually regressed to working as waiters in a restaurant. This naturally created a tumultuous commotion. Every day, there would be visitors attracted to come. Their initial reason was naturally to experience the wonderful feeling of being served by someone on the prodigy roll. However, as long as they had eaten the precious delicacies of Forget-Not, there would definitely be huge groups of return customers. Unfortunately, there was limited space in the restaurant. Even if it opened from morning all the way to late night, customers had still lined up in long queues, which made Lu Yutong think of opening up a branch. After getting Ling Han's approval, she immediately began looking for a new venue in high spirits. In the blink of an eye, another 10 days had passed, and Lu Yutong and the others have also experienced a real hell-like cultivation session within the Black Tower. Ling Han was really training them to the point of near death. The difficulty of their training was enough to cause shivers. Every day, when their training had ended, they would immediately fall asleep the moment they lay down. This also caused Lu Yutong's plan to choose a new venue to be postponed until further notice. However, the effects were also extremely shocking. After squeezing out the potential hidden in all of them, the cultivation of Lu Yutong and the others had very visibly improved. This made Guan Yuan envious, and he, too, joined them for the training. As a result, very soon, they experienced both pain and pleasure at the same time. The four's cultivation improved very quickly, but this experience had also become a nightmare that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Ling Han went off to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion again and made some more queries about the 9-leaf black Ganoderma, but Yin Hong still told him to wait. He then went to Forget Not. At this moment, Lu Yutong and the others were training like crazy in the Black Tower, so he naturally had to take charge of more of the restaurant's matters. Get lost! However, he had just arrived at Forget Not and had not yet entered when 2 people stopped him from going further. What a joke! This was his business, and there was actually someone hailing him over in front of his own business. This whole place has been reserved by my young master. It will not serve any others today, so get lost! Get lost! One man waved his hand at Ling Han disdainfully. Ling Han frowned. He had never allowed the whole restaurant to be reserved before. Looks like this so-called young master had done so by force. Since the latter had done things forcefully, he would not be reserved either. He directly stretched out both hands and picked up the 2 of them. Then he pulled the 2 of them towards each other. The 2 of them were knocked unconscious. He walked in and saw that his waiters were trembling with fear. Meanwhile, Shui Guqing and Ji De Rong had a few footprints on their bodies. Obviously, they had been kicked. There was only a single table in the whole hall on the first floor, where a young man sat. He had an arrogant demeanor, as if he wanted nothing more to walk around with his nose pointing up at the sky. He was at most 20 years old, and there were 4 servants standing behind him. All of them wore expressions of flattery. Hey, the taste is really not bad. Really not bad, the young man said, as he continued eating. Ling Han walked over, and those 4 servants immediately turned towards Ling Han and rebuked. My young master has booked this whole place. Get out of here. This is the first time that I have heard that the owner can't even enter his own place, Ling Han stated calmly. Oh, so you're the boss of this restaurant? The young man glanced towards Ling Han, beckoned him over, and said, You don't have to open up business this month. After I have finished watching the Prodigy tournament, you just follow me back. I guarantee that it will not be your loss. Aren't you going to thank young Master Long? The 4 servants reprimanded at the same time. Chapter 431 Zhu Xuan'er's younger brother. Chapter 431 Zhu Xuan'er's younger brother Dark Angel _ Ling Han smiled and said, Really, thanks a lot. That young Master Long looked very pleased with himself, but he had just barely completed the thought when he felt his vision darken. With a bang, his face was already crashed onto the table. With such a huge impact, the whole table split apart into multiple pieces, and his face was covered in soup. How dare you! The 4 servants yelled furiously and moved to grab Ling Han. Ping, pun, pun, pun. Ling Han instantly shot out 4 punches. The 4 servants gripped their chests tightly, their faces pale. They fell seated on the ground, feeling as if they had a breath of air that was stuck in their air pipes. It was too horrible a feeling for mere words to describe. Fuck, who asked you to be arrogant? Ji De Rong rushed forwards and gave the 4 of them a round of punches and kicks. His cultivation had been sealed, and he had served dishes a bit too slowly. Furthermore, he was an elite cultivator on the prodigy roll, so it was inevitable that he would have his own pride. As a result, that young man ordered his lackeys to give him a few harsh kicks. If it was not for the fact that he had the origin power of spiritual pedestal tier to refine his physical body, he would definitely have been severely wounded by now. As the saying went, when a tiger leaves the mountains and reaches the plains, it'd be bullied by a dog. How could he not feel resentful? Shui Cheng's expression was not much better than his own. However, he was not as rash as Ji De Rong, and furthermore, did not want to fall to the same level as those servants. Ling Han thought for a moment, stretched out his hand and, with a brush, unsealed the cultivation of both Ji De Rong and Shui Cheng. He said, "Because the two of you have performed acceptably these 10 days, I'll consider the debt paid." Shui Cheng and Ji De Rong were a bit disbelieving until they felt the origin power gushing forth within their bodies. That was when they felt they had woken up from a dream. They were both extremely rueful. In these 10 days when their cultivation was sealed, they lived like normal people, which allowed them to have a taste of a different life than their own. It seemed like they had unexpectedly obtained a deeper comprehension in martial arts as a result. "Bastard, you actually dared to injure me?" Young Master Long got to his feet. There was still a piece of carrot dangling about the corner of his lips, and his whole face was covered in soup. His expression was one filled with absolute fury. "Do you know who I am?" Hearing such a familiar line, "I can probably guess that you have a very awesome elder brother, or perhaps father?" Ling Han asked, smiling. "Wrong, I have an incredibly awesome elder sister," young Master Long exclaimed proudly. "Pa!" He was once again knocked down onto the ground by a smack from Ling Han. "Really an idiot that doesn't learn?" Ling Han shook his head. Ji De Rong looked at the young man and said fiercely, "Han, just hand over this brat to to me to deal with, okay?" He licked his lips, fire in his eyes. This young man was only in the 7th layer of the gushing spring tier, yet he was actually thrashed by such a minor character. If he did not repay this favor, how could he still be considered human? In comparison, he was more convinced by Ling Han's power. The latter was indeed very strong, and he could not defeat him. "You all dare!" Young Master Long shouted loudly. "My elder sister is Xuan'er." "Yi!" Ji De Rong and Shui Cheng both exclaimed in surprise. Xuan'er, not only was she a well-known beauty of the North region, she was also well on the path to become the strongest of the younger generation of the North region. Her future accomplishment might possibly even exceed the spiritual infant tier. They could offend anyone except for Xuan'er, because she had too much influence. She needed only to call out, and how many young geniuses were willing to go through water and tread on fire for her sake? Ping! Young Master Long was once again smacked onto the ground by Ling Han's hand. "What are you shouting for? Pay compensation!" Ling Han said fiercely. "Pay compensation? Pay what compensation?" Young Master Long looked very surprised. He was the obvious victim here, wasn't he? "You broke a table in my restaurant, so shouldn't you pay for it?" Ling Han asked fiercely. "It was obviously you who smacked my head onto the table," young Master Long said weakly. With a bang, he was once again smacked onto the floor tiles, and created a hole in the floor. "How dare you! You actually broke the floor tiles in my restaurant!" Ling Han exclaimed darkly. Young Master Long felt very wronged. He was obviously being thrashed by Ling, so why was he the one being blamed? However, after being smacked consecutively for a few times, he finally realized how things were. Ling Han was even more arrogant and forceful than he was, and was unreasonable too. A person like him was usually arrogant, but was most afraid of encountering someone fiercer than them. Now, after being unreasonably beaten by Ling Han a few times, he was finally afraid. "I'll pay," he asked obediently. "How much?" Ling Han snatched the spatial ring that he was wearing, directly erased the divine sense that he had left on it, and swept his own divine sense within. There were actually a few thousand origin crystals inside. He could not help but smile and said, "I'll just take this sum, I won't bear a grudge for it being too little." "You are practically committing robbery here," young Master Long complained. "En?" Ling Han tossed him a glare. Young Master Long hurriedly shook his head and said, "Of course. Of course. You can get lost now. With a casual toss of his hand, Ling Han had thrown young Master Long out, and did the same with his 4 servants. Just you wait and see, I will definitely come back. After young Master Long had raced off a certain distance, he cast out a line that fit the situation, then broke out into a mad run again. Ling Han could not help but laugh loudly. Profligate young masters were really profligate young masters. They only knew how to use their powerful connections as an intimidation tactic. Ling Han, 20 days later, I shall see you at the Prodigy Tournament. By then, I will definitely not lose to you, Shui Guqing declared coldly. Ling Han had heard about the rules of the Prodigy Tournament before. In this kind of battle, it was not allowed to use any kind of alchemical pill or spirit tool to prevent an unjust battle. However, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion would prepare a great amount of weapons which were all forged from level 5 materials. Thought they were not spirit tools, they were extremely sturdy, and could sustain the powerful attacks of the spiritual pedestal tier. In Shui Guqing's eyes, Ling Han had been able to defeat him merely because he had the Demon Birth Sword. Thus, since the Prodigy Tournament did not allow the use of spirit tools, he naturally had a high chance of victory. Ling Han was too lazy to explain. He only waved him off. He'd just have Hunyo ravaged Shui Guqing by then. Ji De Rong broke into a run and fled as well. After being tortured by Ling Han for 10 days, he was filled with wariness of the former, and so naturally wanted to maintain a big distance from this demon. Young Master Long, whose real name was Zhu Longxing, was indeed Zhu Xuan'er's younger brother. In truth, his martial arts talent was not too bad either, but compared with Zhu Xuan'er, there was a very big gap. Furthermore, he did not have the heated drive to pursue martial arts. As a result, since he only liked to have fun and play around, he was currently only in the 7th layer of the Gushing Spring tier. How could he bear to swallow such a huge loss by himself? He immediately raced off to look for help, and his first choice was someone who had just recently addressed him as brother and mingled with closely Lu Qiyuan. When he arrived at Listen to the Rain Pavilion, Lu Qiyuan received him warmly. Good wine and good food, and there were beauties and singers to accompany him as well, fully giving him face. Big brother Qiyuan, I was bullied by someone today. After drinking a few cups of wine, Zhu Longxing could no longer hold back and began to grumble about his grievances to Lu Qiyuan. What, there is actually someone who dares to bully a brother of Lu Qiyuan, me, in this extreme Yang city? Tell me, who is so bold? I shall go and cut off his head for you, Lu Qiyuan immediately declared, patting his chest. Thank you, big brother Qiyuan. Zhu Longxing quickly offered his thanks. I've made my queries. That guy's name is Ling Han. Pooh! Lu Qiyuan suddenly spat out a mouthful of wine directly onto Zhu Longxing. This made Zhu Longxing very confused. They were having a nice conversation, so what do you mean by suddenly spitting wine in my face? Kuh! 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 Lu Qiyuan coughed unstoppably. He hurriedly drank some tea to calm himself, and with hope that things were not like what he had thought, said, It can't be Ling Han from Forget Not, right? It's indeed that guy. Pooh! Lu Qiyuan spat again. Extraordinarily accurately, it was Zhu Longxing's face again. Zhu Longxing. 10,000 curse words flew through his mind. Fuck, I'll forget about you spitting at me once, but twice? Do I have some kind of enmity with you? Chapter 432 Results of the Special Training. Chapter 432 Results of the Special Training. Dark Angel _ Big Brother Qiyuan. Zhu Longxing began weakly. You spat 2 times consecutively at me, and every time was so extraordinarily accurate, hitting my face directly. You did it on purpose, didn't you? Lu Qiyuan's expression became serious. He warned, Don't you ever trifle with that guy. Big brother Qiyuan, why is it that even you are scared of that guy? Zhu Longxing asked strangely. Not only you and I should not trifle with that guy. Even if your elder sister was here and my grandfather moved personally, they would be able to do nothing against him, either. Lu Qiyuan said, shaking his head. How could that be possible? Zhu Longxing exclaimed in shock. He is an earth-grade alchemist. Lu Qiyuan revealed the secret. Pooh! Zhu Longxing spat out his mouthful of tea, and very coincidentally, it was right onto Lu Qiyuan's whole face. He suddenly erupted into a long bout of coughing. Earth-grade alchemist? A young man who was not even 20 years old yet. That was really too shocking. Lu Qiyuan could not help but wear a bitter expression. You did it on purpose, didn't you? Smearing my whole face in revenge, right? But it was he who had first spat at Zhu Longxing, so it would not be appropriate for him to say anything in rebuke. There was naturally a beautiful female attendant who delivered a wet towel for him to wipe his face. Really? Zhu Longxing finally spoke. Lu Qiyuan sighed, thinking, am I that kind of fellow who would be willing to be spat on just for the sake of a lie? He nodded and said, listen to my advice, and don't trifle with that guy. Previously I offended him, and was almost beaten to death by Grandpa. Hiss, so ruthless. Zhu Longxing was extremely shocked and exclaimed, Big Brother Qiyuan, you're the only descendant of the Lu clan. There's nothing to be done. Just think, how old is that guy now, but yet he's already an Earth-grade alchemist. It's very possible for him to become a Heaven-grade alchemist in future. So do you think that my grandpa should give him face or not? Lu Qiyuan shook his head. Zhu Longxing's face was also filled with astonishment. When he thought that his elder sister was currently looking for Heaven-grade alchemists, and if Ling Han became a Heaven-grade alchemist, then with his sister who had a request to make of him, how would he be able to measure up to Ling Han? Perhaps, this guy might even possibly become his brother-in-law. Brother-in-law? That didn't sound too bad. With an Earth-grade alchemist, or even a Heaven-grade alchemist as his brother-in-law, how awesome was that? Thank you, Big Brother Qiyuan. I almost caused a big mess. He breathed out a breath of relief. As the day of the Prodigy tournament grew increasingly closer, there were also more and more young elite cultivators appearing in Extreme Yang City. It was inevitable that young people would be impetuous, and fights and trouble were unavoidable. However, no other fight happened in Forget Not. There was nothing to be done. 2 elites on the Prodigy roll worked here for about 10 days, and they were both about the 20th place. This made all those ranked below 20 think of this restaurant as some place sacred. If you want to make trouble here, no matter what, you should be more powerful than Shui Guqing and Ji De Rong. Moreover, even Zhu Xuan'er's younger brother met with a defeat here, yet there was no sign of Zhu Xuan'er coming here to stand up for her brother, which showed how strong the background the restaurant's owner had. It wasn't that no one had borne any devious schemes, but with 2 such shocking situations there, who would dare attempt sponging off of Forget Not? Another 20 days passed. The Prodigy tournament would begin officially tomorrow. Within the Black Tower, Ling Han finally ceased the special training for Lu Yutong and the others. Today would be for them to take a good rest, and from the next day onwards, it would a real battle. When they came out from the Black Tower, all of them exuded a terrifying aura. After this 1 month of hell training, they were practically able to kill anyone in their way, whether it was a human or a ghost. Kenya's cultivation was the highest. He had reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Guan Yuan had returned to the 9th layer as well, whereas Lu Yutong was at the 8th layer. Zhu Wujiu was the weakest, but even he had reached the 7th layer. The reason why they had managed to improve so quickly was because Ling Han had used golden needle ferrying acupuncture points on them to stimulate their hidden potential. That was how they managed to improve so much in a mere month's time. But this was squeezing out their inner potential. It meant sacrificing their future rate of cultivation as a price. But to obtain a good ranking in the Prodigy tournament, they couldn't care about it anymore. A single person could only use this kind of secret art in their whole lifetimes. If they used it a second time, their power would still increase greatly, but the problem was that their power would continue to increase uncontrollably until their physical body could no longer contain it. Their bodies would then explode and they would die. Furthermore, this was only useful before the flower blossom tier. After breaking through to the flower blossom tier, the cultivator would have cast off his mortal shell, and this kind of technique to stimulate one's hidden potential would no longer be effective. golden needle ferrying acupuncture points, combined with the hell training session, was what allowed them to possess the current shocking cultivation rate. Ling Han and Hun Yo, on the other hand, were still at the peak of the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Ling Han possessed 2 spiritual oceans. One turned clockwise and the other counterclockwise, as if they were 2 millstones. Thus, when his cultivation increased, his origin power was only polished to become ever sturdy, but his cultivation rate was still a bit too fast, and he still needed some more time to reach perfection. It would happen within these few days. He would be able to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier. After a night of rest, all the young people gathered at the great arena of Extreme Yang City. This was the property of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. And with the enormous amount of wealth in their possession, this great arena had been constructed for the purpose of the Prodigy Tournament that would happen every 3 years. Thus, this place appeared to be very majestic and grand, and could accommodate 200,000 spectators at any one time. The circular and high spectators' stands looked as if they were mountains. The first step was naturally to register. The preliminary condition for registration was to be below 30 years old. There was no other restriction. The second step was to test battle prowess. There was a stone plaque used to test one's battle prowess at the registration area. It was created by a great person in ancient times. After one shot out a full power attack at it, it would show the corresponding number of battle stars. Everyone could be ranked according to battle stars, but exactly how many would be able to make it to the actual tournament? That would depend on how many people had left the prodigy role from the last round. Subtracting those who had left due to age, as well as those that had not managed to make it in time or might even have died, the remaining people would automatically qualify for the actual tournament. There was a total of 56 this time round. Thus, a total of 144 people out of all those who came to register would be able to qualify for the actual tournament. These 200 people would draw lots based on the concept of everyone on the rankings would encounter one another and enter into a knockout battle. The last 100 remaining would be the elites of the new prodigy role of the northern region. As for how the remaining would be ranked, that was simple. They would simply battle. Every person would have a battle with the other 99 competitors, and their final rank would be calculated based on the number of their losses and victories. Then, let's go first test our battle prowess. Ling Han's group headed towards the location of the testing stone plaque. Because there was only 200 people who could qualify for the actual tournament, those ranked below 200 were naturally automatically eliminated, and there was no need for them to register. Hey! Did you all see that? A monster appeared just now. He is in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, but his battle prowess is as high as 20 stars. He can almost surge up to spiritual pedestal tier. I know, that guy's name is Chu Xiaozhu, but no one knows where he came from. He's very mysterious. This guy can almost stand equal to Shin Zhongqing from the previous round. He should be slightly inferior to Shin Zhongqing. The white-robed Sword King is one that could defeat opponents in spiritual pedestal tier. Shin Zhongqing, too, had reached the 9th layer of spiritual ocean tier just slightly over a year ago, and he has continuously polished himself since. That was why he could slice a spiritual pedestal tier opponent with his sword, and this Chu Xiaozhu may not be inferior. That's right. Chu Xiaozhu is only 19 years old. They had just reached the place when they already heard the crowds embroiled in heated discussions. There would appear a few monsters with every prodigy role. The last round could deserve the name of the Golden Roll, whereupon such extreme geniuses like Xuan'er, Sui Yude, Lu Yang, and Xinzhong Qing. It was yet unknown how this round would be. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.